Chapter 1. Chu Mu's eyes suddenly opened. Without any thought, he subconsciously slapped down with his left hand and used the force to leap up. His right hand grabbed the left side of his waist, wanting to pull out the sword. This place is dangerous, I must leave as soon as possible. An idea came to his mind. Once he was surrounded, with his skills, he could indeed kill a few people, but in the end, he was bound to die. But his right hand grabbed empty air. He felt that he had leaped up and seemed to have lost control. In his horror, before he could react to what was going on, his body fell again. With a bang, his whole body fell heavily. Only then did he realize that he had fallen on a hard wooden bed. The wooden bed made a creaking sound that made one's teeth ache. After a quick glance, he found that he was in a dimly lit room. The walls of this room were brown hard wooden plank. It was less than 30 square meters, like an unfinished house. It looked very ordinary and simple. In addition to the single hard wooden bed under him, there were 2 similar hard wooden beds. Each hard wooden bed had a wooden table and a wooden chair at the head of the bed. A sword was hanging at the head of the bed, and there was also a small cubicle that might be a toilet. Moreover, Chu Mu was also shocked to find that he did not seem to be injured. Except for a little pain from falling down on the hard wooden bed, there was no other pain. What is this place? Am I not being hunted? Why am I here? A series of questions flashed through his mind. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his head, as if many things were constantly being stuffed into it. It was like a sharp knife was forcefully stirring. His body trembled uncontrollably, and his muscles tightened. He groaned, clenched his teeth, and his face turned pale. He hugged his head with both hands and curled up on the hard wooden bed like a shrimp. 20 years of hard practice in swordsmanship had created an incomparably strong will. Otherwise, if it was an ordinary person, under the constant stirring and the constant pouring of things into his head, he was afraid that he would not be able to bear the pain and would die. It felt as if several years had passed before the stirring and bursting in his head weakened a little bit. Finally, it calmed down, just like the raging sea that had returned to calm. In fact, the whole process only took a quarter of an hour. His body was dripping with sweat, and his clothes were wet and stuck to his body. It made him feel cold and a little sticky. Moreover, because of the continuous tightening of his muscles, he now felt a little sore all over his body. However, he did not care about this. What he really cared about was the extra things in his head, some memories that did not originally belong to him. Chu Mu was a sword master, and an outstanding one at that. Moreover, he had the reputation of being the youngest sword master. Since then, under the careful guidance of this swordsmanship master, his swordsmanship attainment level by level after level of swordsmanship level by level. His teacher only taught Chu Mu one set of swordsmanship, basic swordsmanship, also known as basic swordsmanship. There were a total of 12 movements, which were summed up by generations of swordsmanship masters after painstaking efforts. It was a compulsory swordsmanship that laid a solid foundation for swordsmanship. It was also a compulsory swordsmanship that every swordsman must learn in their swordsmanship career. At the age of 12, he passed the swordsmanship apprentice examination of the Swordsmanship Association and became a swordsmanship apprentice, breaking the record of the whole city. At the age of 18, he passed the Swordsmanship Master examination of the Swordsmanship Association and became a true swordsmanship master, breaking the record of the whole province. At the age of 23, he passed the Swordsmanship Master examination of the Swordsmanship Association and became a swordsmanship master, breaking the record of the whole country. At the age of 26, his swordsmanship became even more profound, and he defeated his teacher. His teacher said that he was born for swordsmanship. This time, he visited a swordsmanship master of the Swordsmanship Association, and after fighting for half an hour, he barely won by half a move. His physical strength was almost exhausted, and he took a short rest. When he left, it was already late at night. In a small alley, he was surrounded by dozens of desperados armed with machetes. The purpose of these people was to kill him, and the reason was that he had defeated the swordsmanship master of the Swordsmanship Association. Ever since this swordsmanship master received the title of swordsmanship master, he had never been defeated. His reputation was prominent, and he was vaguely known as the #1 swordsman below swordsmanship grandmasters. Therefore, he saw Chu Mu's challenge as guidance for the younger generation. Unexpectedly, he lost by half a move in the end. He could not accept it. This swordsmanship master could not accept the fact that he had been defeated. He thought that once the news spread, his reputation would be greatly damaged, and this would help this young swordsmanship master. Thus, he harbored evil intentions and sent a disciple out to get a large local gang to surround and kill Chu Mu. Even though Chu Mu was strong, and his sword was constantly knocking down the besiegers, there were too many of them. His physical strength was insufficient, and he could not break out of the encirclement. After knocking down dozens of people, his physical strength was exhausted, and he was completely relying on his willpower to hold on. He was slashed a few times, and blood flowed out. He was in excruciating pain. Bathed in blood, he finally knocked down more than 30 people, scared off the remaining desperados, and killed his way out of the encirclement. However, due to excessive blood loss, he collapsed before he could go far. He fell into darkness, and when he woke up, he found himself here. Swordsman, Mizar City, Chu family, Wang family, Qingfeng sword sect. Chu Mu came back to his senses and muttered to himself. His eyes slowly became clear, and in the end, they shone with a sharp light. Is this a blessing in disguise? Or is this a gift from the heavens? I'm lucky enough to come to such a world, and I'm even given a brand new body with the same name, Chu Mu. Ha 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 ha. As it turned out, the churning and splitting pain in his head earlier was caused by a memory that did not belong to him that had taken the initiative to fuse with him. Now that he had completely absorbed that memory, he even felt his mind become clearer. When he closed his eyes, he could faintly feel the floating dust on the surface of his body. After fusing with an unfamiliar soul and absorbing a memory, he already knew his current situation. Even though he felt it was very miraculous and inconceivable, it was the truth. His ability to accept things was extremely strong, and the information about this world in his memory made his blood boil with excitement. The owner of this body was also called Chu Mu. It just so happened that he had the same name, which saved him some trouble. The ancient sword continent mainly cultivated the way of the sword, and it had already reached its peak. Geniuses of the way of the sword emerged one after another, and experts of the way of the sword stood in great numbers. These people who practiced the way of the sword had a unified name, swordsman. The Chu Mu of this world was 16 years old this year. He was a member of the younger generation of the Chu family, one of the 3 great clans in Mizar City under the jurisdiction of the great Kuan dynasty's Li province. His father, Chu Xingyun, was a direct descendant of the Chu family. He was a deacon in the family, and could be considered a person with real power in the family. He also had an older brother, Chu Tian, who was 2 years older than him and had a 7th-grade cultivation talent. He was one of the top 3 figures in the younger generation of the Chu family under the age of 20. He had entered the middle-rank sword sect, the Flowing Cloud sword sect, as an inner disciple. As for Chu Mu, he was a little disappointing, as he only had a 9th-grade cultivation talent. In fact, a 9th-grade cultivation talent was not much. After all, in the entire Chu family, there were many people with a 10th-grade cultivation talent. Therefore, a 9th-grade cultivation talent could only be said to be more common. However, the problem lay with Chu Tian. Chu Tian had a 7th-grade cultivation talent and could be ranked in the top 3 of the younger generation of the Chu family. He could be called a young genius of the Chu family, but his younger brother was far inferior. Naturally, he would always be compared by others. Over time, even some people with 10th grade cultivation talents looked down on him. According to these people, their 10th grade cultivation talents could not be helped. They were born with 10th grade cultivation talent, who asked their parents and siblings to be the same. Chumu was different. He had an elder brother who was called a genius, which formed a sharp contrast. It was equivalent to living under his elder brother's shadow. Among them, the one who looked down on him the most was his second uncle, Chu Xingfeng's daughter, Chu Hong. Chu Hong's cultivation talent was also 7th grade, which was on par with Chu Tian. Their strength was almost on par, and they were competing for the second place of the younger generation of the Chu family. Even so, Chu Mu was a little carefree. He did not care about these things. Every day, besides spending some time to cultivate sword chi and sword arts, he would wander around the county. Because of his ordinary cultivation talent, Chu Xingyun did not ask for too much. He only hoped that he could live a happy life. Aside from the Chu family, there were also the Wang and Lin families in Kaiyang City. Once, he met the second daughter of the Lin family, Lin Luoshui. He was shocked and began to boldly pursue her. At first, Lin Luoshui did not have much resistance to him. She could even talk and laugh with him. However, when she found out about Chu Mu's identity, her attitude changed drastically. She was disgusted and treated him coldly. Coincidentally, the third young master of the Wang family, Wang Lin, happened to pass by. He also had feelings for Lin Luoshui. Without saying a word, he attacked him and knocked him to the ground. Lin Luoshui was already disgusted. She could not wait for him to suffer more. She added a few more words to add fuel to the fire, causing him to be beaten up violently. He fainted and was carried back to the Chu family. After that, he became famous again. This time, he was infamous for flirting with the second daughter of the Lin family. The third young master of the Wang family, Wang Lin, became the hero who saved the beauty. Although the Chu family and the Wang family did not get along, this was a dispute between the younger generation. Secondly, the Wang family's strength was 2 times stronger than the Chu family. Therefore, they could only leave it unsettled. After waking up, he remained silent for 2 days. He worked hard and cultivated with all his might. He did not leave his room for an entire month. However, his talent was indeed average, so he did not make much progress. Hoping that their children would succeed in life was the deepest wish of every parent. However, Chu Xingyun and his wife were busy managing the Chu family's business. They did not have much time to teach Chu Mu. As a result, Chu Xingyun took out a large amount of his savings and found some connections to send him to the low-rank Azure Edge Sword sect as an outer disciple. Although it was only a low-rank sword sect, the Azure Edge Sword sect was still much stronger than the Chu family. He believed that he would be able to cultivate better and increase his strength in the sword sect. That was also what he thought. He felt that if he became a disciple of the Azure Edge Sword sect, he would definitely be able to increase his strength faster. When he succeeded in his cultivation, he would definitely settle the score with Wang Lin. However, he quickly discovered that things were not so simple. Less than a month after he joined the Azure Edge Sword sect, trouble came knocking on his door. Wang Lei was a veteran outer disciple of the Azure Edge Sword sect. He was at the 5th stage of the Sword Chi realm. His other identity was the son of a deacon of the Wang family in Kaiyang County. When Wang Lin found out that Chu Mu had joined the Azure Edge Sword sect, he specifically instructed Wang Lei to treat him well so that he would not be able to stay in the Azure Edge Sword sect any longer. This time, Wang Lei brought Wang Yi and Wang Zhang to find Chu Mu. They used all sorts of insults to provoke him and finally forced him to make a move. However, Chu Mu was only at the 3rd stage of the Sword Chi realm. He had only been practicing the basic sword techniques of the Azure Edge Sword sect for less than a month. How could he be a match for Wang Lei? After a few moves, He was knocked unconscious by Wang Lei. Fortunately, Chu Mu, who had transmigrated, was able to fuse with his soul, obtain his memories, and obtain a new body. Chu Mu, we have the same name. Now that we are one, we are one. You are me and I am you. In my previous life, I was able to become the youngest sword master in the entire country. In this life, I can also become one of the strongest swordsmen on the continent. Chu Mu muttered to himself. In his tone, there was a confidence that shot straight to the heavens. And everything you've endured is equivalent to everything I've endured. No matter if it's Wang Lei, Wang Lin, or Lin Luoshui, I'll settle this debt with them. I'll also let those who mocked me know just how ignorant they are. Chapter 2. The Qingfeng sword sect had a clear rule that all disciples below the 7th stage of the sword Qi realm were outer disciples. Furthermore, those below the 4th stage of the sword Qi realm were to live in a wooden house with 3 people in the southern district. They were also required to undertake daily chores, such as going down the mountain to fetch water, planting vegetables, washing clothes, cooking, and so on. Chu Mu's cultivation was at the 3rd stage of the sword Qi realm, so he was also required to complete daily chores. The chores he was assigned were to fetch water, but this time, he was knocked out by Wng Lei. Therefore, his chores were assigned to his 2 roommates by the deacon of the chore hall. At this moment, his 2 roommates were probably doing their best to fetch water. He got out of bed, wiped off the sweat on his body, and changed into a set of dry gray cotton clothes. He took the sword hanging at the head of the bed and strode outside. In his previous life, he loved swords so much that he even hugged his sword when he slept. In this life, however, the desire to become stronger had already sprouted in his heart. Under the superposition of these 2 desires, he could not wait to cultivate. The Qingfeng sword sect was located on Mount Qinglan. According to his memory, he left the outer disciples' quarters and came to a cliff a few miles away. This place was found by Chu Mu half a month ago in order to find a quiet place to cultivate without being disturbed. It was rather secluded, and one had to walk through a dense patch of grass and pass through a small hole that was a few meters long and a meter high to reach it. The entire cliff was like a tongue sticking out. It was not very big, about 40 to 50 square meters in size. The entire cliff was flat, with only a green pine tree protruding out of the corner. It was very lush and verdant. On one side of the cliff, there was only the small hole and the mountain wall, while on the other side was an endless sea of clouds. A quarter of an hour later, Chu Mu crossed the grass and came to the cliff. Looking at the boundless sky and endless sea of clouds, his heart was wide open, as if it could contain the world. After a quarter of an hour of brisk walking, the blood and qi in his body flowed faster, and his body was also moving. His whole body was filled with a warm feeling of strength. He also felt a warm qi slowly flowing in his body and limbs, allowing him to walk quickly without feeling tired at all. This must be the sword qi cultivated by the swordsmen of the ancient sword continent. Chu Mu thought to himself with a slightly excited expression. It's indeed very magical. The cultivation of the swordsmen on Earth is purely based on basic swordsmanship. Their physical fitness is slightly better than that of ordinary people. It is said that only those who have cultivated to the level of a sword master can activate the sword qi. However, which sword master is not a 7th or 8th elder? He recalled that when he was on Earth, his master had brought him to visit a swordsmanship master, an old man who was almost 90 years old. Although he had a head full of white hair, his face was rosy and his skin was as smooth as a baby's. There was also an indescribable aura of sharpness around him. If one looked at him for too long, their eyes would hurt. His master had told him that it was sword qi. Only after reaching the realm of sword master could one produce sword qi, and this sword qi could unknowingly improve one's physique and prolong one's life. Once upon a time, I was very envious. I didn't expect that now, not only do I have a 16-year-old body, but I also have qi. Chu was secretly delighted. A 16-year-old body and a 26-year-old body were completely different. A 16-year-old body meant that there was still a lot of plasticity. Furthermore, he had reached the level of a sword master, had a deep understanding of swordsmanship, and had extraordinary talent in swordsmanship. He believed that he could definitely achieve something and achieve something in the path of swordsmanship. Don't think too much. Let's cultivate. Having said that, he drew his sword. The clanging sound of the sword resounded on the cliff. Putting the scabbard aside, Chu carefully examined the sword in his hand. To be a qualified swordsmanship master, one must first learn the art of sword observation. Before practicing, one must have a clear understanding of the sword in one's hand, such as its length and weight. Only by having a clear understanding of the sword in one's heart could one better practice the sword and unleash the power of swordsmanship. The sword in Chu hand was a steel sword commonly used by the outer disciples of the Qinfeng sword school. Just by looking at it carefully and feeling it in his hand, Chu was able to determine the length, width, thickness, and weight of this steel sword. Immediately after, he sheathed the sword and drew it again. After drawing and sheathing the sword 100 times, he drew it again. Holding the sword in his right hand, he pointed the tip of the sword diagonally to the ground. His footsteps staggered, and he assumed the starting position of the basic swordsmanship. Closing his eyes in an instant, the wind seemed to have stopped. Opening his eyes, they flashed with a sharp light. At the same time, he let out a low roar and raised his sword. Sword light flashed. The sword light was sharp and straight. His steps were accompanied by the sword, and his body followed the sword. His eyes, hands, and feet became one. With the sword in his hand and his eyes in his heart, his body leaped, and his sword soared into the sky like a phoenix. Half an hour later, he had finished practicing the basic swordsmanship 30 times. Sheathing his sword, he stood there and adjusted his qi. Holding the sword in his hand, he stood still and looked straight at the endless sea of clouds. The basic swordsmanship is the foundation of a swordsman. Although I have transmigrated to this world, and there are no swordsmen but only swordsmen, I am a swordsman in my bones. I cannot forget my root. After fusing with the memories, he already knew that there were many powerful swordsmanship above the basic swordsmanship in the ancient sword continent. Any one of these swordsmanship on Earth would be enough to cause a bloodbath. However, after practicing the basic swordsmanship for 20 years, it had become an instinct that was branded in his soul. Even after transmigrating and changing into a new body, he did not change this habit and did not want to change it. At least, the more solid the basic swordsmanship was, the more stable the foundation of the swordsmanship would be. It would be more helpful for the practice of other swordsmanship. Next, let's practice sword sight and sword hearing. Sheathing his sword, Lin Fan faced the sea of clouds. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the sea of clouds without blinking. He observed carefully, observing the changes of the white clouds in the sea of clouds. He did not miss a single detail. The wisps of clouds were like dancing swords. Only when his eyes were sore did he slowly close his eyes. He listened attentively, listening to the subtle sounds in the air around him. The sound of the wind blowing, the sound of the clouds moving, the sound of the pine branches swaying in the wind. He carefully distinguished them and found that they all formed the sound of a sword being drawn. Sword sight, sword hearing, and sword touch. This was what Chu had to practice in addition to the basic swordsmanship. It was also a method that a swordsman must master. Sword sight was to observe the swordsmanship. There was a saying in the swordsmanship world on Earth that observing a sword was like observing a person. Sword sight was to train the eyes to follow the trajectory of the sword. It was to know the direction and final landing point of the opponent's sword as soon as it was drawn. Sword hearing was more difficult than sword sight. It was to close the eyes and rely purely on the ears to listen to the subtle sounds in the air. For example, the buzzing of mosquitoes a few meters away, the subtle sound of leaves falling slowly, the soft sound of sprouts breaking through the soil, and so on. Sword touch was more profound than sword sight and sword hearing. It was not about seeing or listening, but feeling. To be precise, it was about feeling the subtle waves in the air with the hair and skin on every part of one's body to make a judgment. When practiced to a high level, one could even clearly visualize the overall shape of the target in one's mind through feeling. Moreover, one could sense the trajectory of the target from 10 meters away. According to Chu Mu's master, there were several swordsmanship masters who practiced sword touch to an extremely profound level. They could predict in advance and dodge bullets within 10 meters. It was said that above sword touch, there was sword intent. This sword intent was just a legend and was very mysterious. Sword sight, sword hearing, sword touch, and sword intent were known as the 5 realms of swordsmanship on earth. Next, I'll practice flying cloud swordsmanship. After finishing his swordsmanship, Chu Mu began to practice a new swordsmanship. During this time, he had already recalled the movements of flying cloud swordsmanship in his mind. Flying cloud swordsmanship was an introductory swordsmanship. It had a certain level of power above the basic swordsmanship and was the first choice for many swordsmanship sect's disciples. When the sword pierced out, it was immediately different from the stab of the basic swordsmanship. It did not look straight, but like a wisp of cloud that flew out in a zigzag manner. It curved, outlined, changed, and condensed, gradually forming the outline of a flying cloud. Flying cloud swordsmanship was also known as the 13 forms of flying cloud. The first 10 forms did not have a special name and were simply referred to as the basic forms. The movements were coherent from the first form to the 10th form in one go. It was as if the sword in one's hand was a brush and the void was a canvas to draw the outline of a flying cloud. When the outline was clearly visible, it meant that the first 10 forms were mastered and one could practice the last 3 forms. The 11th form was cloud gathering, the 12th form was flying cloud, and the 13th form was cloud scattering and cloud destruction. It had been less than a month since he became an outer disciple of Qinfeng sword sect. He had only practiced flying cloud swordsmanship for about 20 days. Every day, other than fetching water, he practiced flying cloud swordsmanship diligently. After 20 days, he had only mastered the first 5 forms. He was still very far away from mastering the flying cloud swordsmanship. This time, there was no obstruction at all. He practiced all the way to the 10th form in one go. Everything was so coherent and natural, as if he had practiced it hundreds or thousands of times. After completing the first 10 forms, the outline of a flying cloud appeared in the void in front of him. It meant that he had mastered the first 10 forms of flying cloud swordsmanship. This feeling, is it because of my talent in swordsmanship, or the basic swordsmanship that I have practiced diligently? Or is it because of all 3? Chu Mu was slightly excited. He felt that with his talent, he should be able to master the flying cloud swordsmanship very quickly. However, this speed was still beyond his expectations. Continue practicing. He practiced again, from the first form to the 10th form, over and over again. It was as if he was a part of nature. After 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, a flying cloud appeared clearly. Good, now that I have truly mastered the first 10 forms of flying cloud swordsmanship, I can practice the last 3 forms. The fine steel sword vibrated and the 11th form of flying cloud swordsmanship was performed. The sword light flickered and traces of clouds gathered. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a cloud that was about a meter long. The sword light turned and shot forward. The 12th form of flying cloud swordsmanship was already formed. The cloud whistled and flew forward, rushing towards the mountain wall. The sword light shook and dispersed once again. The clouds whistled as they rushed out for a few meters before dispersing, turning into streaks of sword chi that shot out in all directions. After they disappeared, they left behind faint marks on the mountain walls. At this moment, He felt the sword chi in his limbs surging uncontrollably and rushing towards his body. It was like a raging flood dragon rushing towards his dantian 3 inches below his navel. It poured into his dantian like a hot knife through butter and became docile again. He closed his eyes and focused. After his consciousness changed rapidly, he saw his dantian. He also saw the sword chi that was pouring into his dantian like a raging flood dragon. Strands of sword chi fused together and slowly rotated in his dantian. 4th stage of sword chi realm. He was overjoyed. He didn't expect that he would not only master the flying cloud swordsmanship, but also break through to the 4th stage of sword chi realm. Since I have mastered the flying cloud swordsmanship and reached the 4th stage of sword chi realm, I will go to the chore hall to register. In the future, I won't have to do any missions anymore. I will go to the sword pavilion to find a new swordsmanship to practice. Chumu said. After practicing the flying cloud swordsmanship a few more times, he sheathed his sword and turned around to leave. Chapter 3. A figure moved as if he was flying. After leaving the precipice, he ran all the way. Level 4 sword chi realm meant that his overall strength had improved significantly. When he ran, his body was as light as a swallow, as if he was riding the wind. The chore hall was located in the outer area of the Qinfeng sword sect, near the outer disciples' residential area. It was not big and looked more formal. It had a grayish-white exterior and took up a lot of space. It was overseen by a deacon. Every day, outer disciples who were below level 4 sword chi realm had to report to the chore hall to receive their daily task. After completing their tasks, they had to go to the chore hall to confirm their daily task. Therefore, there were many outer disciples entering and exiting the chore hall every day. It was very lively. Not long after, Chumu arrived outside of the chore hall and walked in with large strides. There were more than 1,000 outer disciples in the Qinfeng sword sect. Among them, 60 to 70% were below level 4 sword chi realm. As a newcomer who rarely interacted with others, he naturally did not know many people. Even if he did not know others, it did not mean that others did not know him. Hey, isn't that the unlucky guy who was knocked out by senior brother WNG Lei after being teased by him yesterday? What's his name again? I think it's Chumu. He's really unlucky. I heard that he offended senior brother WNG Lei in less than a month after coming to our sect. Poor guy, he's going to have a hard time in the future. Speaking of which, I remember that a few months ago, someone offended senior brother WNG Lei. After being tortured by senior brother WNG Lei and his followers a few times, he could not take it anymore and left the Qinfeng sword sect. I wonder how long this poor guy can last? Although the discussion was not loud, Chu Mu's 5 senses had improved significantly after the soul fusion. Therefore, he could still hear them. Looks like WNG Lei is quite infamous among the outer disciples. He sneered in his heart. But that doesn't scare me. I'll settle our scores with you. Oh right, I think I saw 2 of senior brother WNG Lei's followers enter the chore hall. I wonder what they're doing. What do you think will happen to this unlucky guy if he bumps into them? It must be terrible. Let's go and watch the show. So that's how it is. Wang Lei's lackey is here. Very well, I'll collect some interest from you first. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with sharpness, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. Just as he was about to reach the steps of the chore hall, 2 people walked down the steps. When they saw Chu Mu, their expressions changed. Chu Mu, why are you here? Zhao Taimu strode over, his expression becoming somewhat nervous. He hurriedly grabbed Chu Mu's arm and pulled Chu Mu away. He lowered his voice and said, WNG Lei's 2 lackeys are inside. Don't go in no matter what. Hurry up and leave. Otherwise, if they see you, they will definitely bully you. Zhao Taimu was one of Chu Mu's roommates. He had entered the Azure Edge sword sect a few months earlier than Chu Mu. He was a very honest person. Some people are really lucky. After sleeping enough, they just wander around and don't need to do any task. Unlike us, who already have plenty of tasks on our own, we actually have to share them with others. A strange voice sounded. It was Wei Qian, Chu Mu's other roommate. He didn't dare to refuse the chore hall's deacon to share Chu Mu's daily tasks, but he was very dissatisfied with Chu Mu in his heart. "Thank you, Brother Wei. Thank you, Brother Zhao." Chu Mu didn't think much of it. He cupped his hands and said gratefully, "Humph." Wei Qian's expression changed. Chu Mu's attitude made him feel as if he had punched cotton. He was prepared to say something, but he couldn't say it out loud. He could only coldly snort and walk away. "Wang Lei's 2 followers are inside. If you don't want to be knocked unconscious again, you'd better leave this place immediately. Otherwise, I won't share your daily tasks anymore." Chu Mu Wei Qian has a good heart. It's just that he has a sharp tongue. Don't take it to heart, Zhao Taimu explained. He pulled Chu Mu with force. "Let's leave quickly. You go back first." It was as if he had taken root on the ground. No matter how Zhao Taimu pulled, he wouldn't budge. This made Zhao Taimu very surprised, but he didn't think too much about it. "Chu Mu, hurry up and leave. If you don't leave now, it'll be too late." Zhao Taimu pulled with all his might as he anxiously shouted, "Since you're here, don't leave." At this time, a mocking voice sounded. Zhao Taimu's face turned pale in an instant. He also let go of Chu Mu's sleeve. "Hee, we were just about to visit you. Who would have thought that you would take the initiative to come to us? They're out. There's a good show to watch." At the side, there were already many outer disciples below the 4th stage of the Sword Chi realm gathered. They all maintained a spectating attitude. Wei Qian, who was about to leave, also stopped. He watched from afar as his expression changed. Zhao Taimu gritted his teeth and took a step forward. "Senior brothers, Chu Mu has just woken up. He still needs to rest. If he gets hurt again, if something happens, it will be hard for you two to explain." One of the rules of the Green Edge Sword sect was that outer disciples could spar with each other. However, no deaths or serious injuries were allowed. Otherwise, when the sect investigated, the one who initiated the fight would be expelled from the sect or even killed. Zhao Taimu, you want to be the good guy again? Looks like you want to go against us too. Since that's the case, we'll take care of you too." One of W&G Lei's lackeys, Wang Chong, threatened with a disdainful sneer. "Senior brothers, please be magnanimous." Wei Qian gritted his teeth and walked over. He stood beside Zhao Taimu and cupped his hands at Wang Chong and Wang Yi. "You two are roommates, right? You two are really close. However, with just the two of you, who are only at the 3rd stage of the Sword Chi realm, you want to stop us? You really don't know what's good for you." Wang Yi's face turned gloomy and ferocious. "Brother Zhao, Brother Wei, I am very grateful for your protection. However, this matter has nothing to do with you. I will deal with it." His tone was calm. It was neither sad nor happy, neither slow nor fast. It naturally had a unique bearing. He took 2 steps forward, walked past Zhao Taimu and Wei Qian, and faced Wang Chong and Wang Yi. "You two are W&G Lei's lackeys, right? If you want to make a move, do it quickly. First, I will collect some interest from you two. After that, I will settle the rest with W&G Lei." The moment the words left his mouth, everyone was stunned. Absolute silence. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle dropping could be heard clearly. Everyone stared at Chu Mu with their mouths wide open. Their eyeballs were bulging so much that they were about to fall out. "You don't know what's good for you. Too arrogant. He's been beaten silly." Everyone knew that Wang Chong and Wang Yi were W&G Lei's lackeys. However, not a single outer court disciple dared to say this to their face. Chu Mu was the first. Moreover, he actually dared to say that he would collect interest from Wang Chong and Wang Yi. After that, he would settle the rest with W&G Lei. How arrogant was this? It's over. Chu Mu has been beaten silly by W&G Lei. Zhao Taimu and Wei Qian's faces were deathly pale. The same thought flashed through their minds at the same time. Ha 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 ha! Wang Chong and Wang Yi were so angry that they laughed. This was the first time someone had said this to them. Moreover, it was from an outer court disciple who was nothing in their eyes. Their faces were ashen, the veins on their foreheads were throbbing. Their eyes were filled with an ominous glint. Anger burned in their hearts, filling their chests. Their chests heaved up and down like bellows, on the verge of exploding. Their anger had already swallowed their rationality. Clang! Clang! Wang Chong and Wang Yi unsheathed their swords at the same time. 2 rays of dazzling light shot out from their swords. Their anger made them lose their rationality. Kill! Wang Chong roared. A cloud formed under his sword. Kill! Wang Yi also let out a roar. Wang Zhang's flying cloud, under his sword, quickly charged forward to attack Chu Mu. It's over! Zhao Taimu and Wei Qian's faces were filled with despair. Wang Zhang and Wang Yi were both at the 4th stage of the Sword Qi realm. Moreover, they had joined forces to perform the 11th and 12th moves of the Soaring Cloud sword technique. Thus, they were even more furious and merciless in their attacks. Even if they were also in the 4th stage of the Sword Qi boundary, they wouldn't be able to avoid it. Not to mention, Chu Mu was only in the 3rd stage of the Sword Qi boundary. It hadn't even been a month since he entered the sect. It's the 11th and 12th forms of the Flying Cloud sword art. So powerful. I've heard that they are good at working together. Sure enough, the 2 of them working together is faster. It's much more difficult than one person performing it alone. The 2 of them must have a good understanding of each other. There's going to be blood. Someone's going to die. Something big is going to happen. This is bad. Deacon Yan Quan of the Chore Hall heard the commotion outside and came out to see what was going on. He was just in time to see Wang Chong angrily unsheathing his sword. His heart skipped a beat and his face changed drastically. He quickly rushed out, trying to save Chu Mu before the 13th form of the Flying Cloud sword art was displayed. But even though he was in the 7th stage of the Sword Qi boundary, he was still too far away from Wang Chong. Yan Quan's heart sank and his face turned gloomy. He seemed to have seen Chu Mu falling down with blood all over his body. And he was implicated in this matter, and got himself into trouble for no reason. He couldn't help but feel hatred for Wang Chong and Wang Yi. Wang Chong and Wang Yi's faces were practically distorted. They were incomparably malevolent and their eyes revealed an ominous glint. Their reasoning had already been swallowed up by the flames of anger. They didn't have the slightest bit of concern for the consequences. Instead, they had the pleasure of killing Chu Mu. It filled their entire bodies and they couldn't extricate themselves. Zhao Taimu and Wei Qian closed their eyes, while the other outer disciples opened their eyes wide, afraid that they would miss something. Full of flaws. Chu Mu sneered. In the eyes of others, the combination of the 11th and 12th forms was perfect, but in his eyes, it was full of flaws. In an instant, the crowd heard a melodious sound, like the friction of divine metals from outer space, making their souls tremble slightly. Shortly after, a dazzling snow-white light shot down from the sky like an aurora, blinding their eyes and causing them to involuntarily close their eyes. They only felt a stinging pain in their eyes, as if they were pricked by needles. Chu Mu unsheathed his sword. Shwa 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 shwa, it was as if he was pointing at the mountains and rivers. A strange scene appeared. The flying cloud that was rapidly charging towards him suddenly paused. Then, it turned around and flew towards Wang Chong and Wang Yi. Yan Quan's eyes widened as he watched this unbelievable scene. Scatter! Chu Mu whispered. His steel sword vibrated as he displayed the clouds. Scatter clouds vanish. Under Wang Chong and Wang Yi's incredulous and horrified gaze, the flying cloud rushed towards them. Then, they turned into streaks of sharp clouds and shot out. Each streak of sharp clouds was like the tip of a sharp sword that cut through their bodies. No! Wang Chong and Wang Yi kept screaming, They only felt an incomparable pain, as if they were being cut into pieces. Their steel swords fell to the ground. When the flying cloud completely disappeared, their faces and bodies were covered with more than 10 wounds, blood dripping out. Their faces were ashen white as they slowly fell backwards, their limbs constantly twitching. Yan Quan craned his neck, looking like a toad. When the other outer disciples, Zhao Taimu and Wei Qian, opened their eyes, they saw Chu Mu unscathed as he sheathed his sword, his movements elegant and confident. Then, they saw Wang Chong and Wang Yi lying on the ground with blood dripping out of their bodies. For a moment, their brains completely short-circuited. Chapter 4. Wang Chong and Wang Yi were quickly carried away for treatment. Chu Mu also told Yan Quan the reason for his visit. Yan Quan immediately used the aura observation technique to confirm that Chu Mu had indeed reached the 4th stage of the sword chi boundary. In the future, he would no longer need to do any missions. In addition, reaching the 4th stage of the sword chi boundary meant that he was qualified to be trained by the Green Edge Sword sect. Chu Mu could move out of his original wooden house and find an empty one in the northern district of the Outer Disciples. Those below the 4th stage of the sword chi boundary could live in a wooden house with 3 people, but once they reached the 4th stage of the sword chi boundary, they could enjoy the right to live in a single wooden house. Not only would they have more time to cultivate, but they would also have an environment where they would not be easily disturbed. Moreover, their meals would be more delicious and nutritious. During this time, Yan Quan also expressed that if this matter was brought to the sword sect, he would stand on Chu Mu's side and testify that he was forced to fight back and did not take the initiative to attack. In this way, Chu Mu would not be punished. Instead, it would be Wang Chong and Wang Yi who would suffer. On one hand, Yan Quan was indeed somewhat angry with Wang Chong and Wang Yi. On the other hand, he saw with his own eyes that Chu Mu not only broke through Wang Chong and Wang Yi's joint attack, he even countered their flying cloud sword technique and heavily injured them. This was something that even Yan Quan, a 7th stage sword chi boundary expert, could not do. How sharp of a vision and deep of a understanding of sword techniques were required to do so. Therefore, Yan Quan felt that Chu Mu's talent in sword techniques was not to be underestimated. Such a person was indeed weak now, but he had the potential to become a strong expert. Yan Quan's goodwill was actually a kind of early investment. Speaking of which, he did not have to pay any price. In addition, Yan Quan also made it clear that Wang Lei was nothing. Although he was stronger than Wang Chong and Wang Yi, he was only at the 5th stage of the sword chi boundary. The main reason was that Wang Lei was related to an inner disciple. This inner disciple was called Wang Feng. Like Wang Lei, Wang Chong and Wang Yi, he came from the same family. He was also Wang Lei's elder brother. His cultivation was at the 8th stage of the sword chi boundary. He was the real threat. Fortunately, Wang Feng was out training and would not be back so soon. WNG Lei's cultivation is at the 5th stage of the sword chi realm. With my cultivation at the 4th stage of the sword chi realm, coupled with my understanding and mastery of swordsmanship, I might not be at a disadvantage even if I were to fight WNG Lei. After leaving the chore hall, Chu Mu headed to the sword pavilion as he thought to himself. But WNG Lei has a relationship with an inner disciple, and that inner disciple is his elder brother. This is a little troublesome. Inner disciples have to be at least at the 7th level of the sword chi realm before they are qualified to apply. In other words, every inner disciple has to be at least at the 7th level of the sword chi realm. The current me is no match for them at all. Moreover, Wang Feng was at the 8th stage of the sword chi realm, which was even stronger than the 7th stage. In addition, outer court disciples are not allowed to take the initiative to provoke inner court disciples. Otherwise, it would be a violation of the sect rules. However, inner court disciples have the authority to suppress outer court disciples. While Wang Feng is back, I have to quickly increase my strength. Every moment is precious. Chu Mu immediately felt the pressure double. Wang Feng was WNG Lei's elder brother, and Wang Chong and Wang Yi were W&G Lei's lackeys. He did not think that Wang Feng would treat him well after knowing about this. An hour later, they arrived at the Sword Pavilion. The Sword Pavilion was a pavilion. It wasn't very big, and the surroundings were spacious. There were a total of 3 floors in the Sword Pavilion. They were divided into left and right, and each floor was guarded by an elder. The left floor was for swordsmanship, while the right floor was for sword chi arts. Do you know that only by learning the flying cloud sword technique can one have the qualifications to enter the left sword pavilion to choose a new sword technique or movement technique? The Sword Pavilion Guardian Elder indifferently glanced at Chu Mu and spoke neither quickly nor slowly. Elder, I have already mastered the flying cloud sword art. Chu Mu saluted with his sword and replied. Practice it once, the elder said. Drawing his sword, Zhang Xian began practicing the flying cloud sword art. His movements were smooth and fluid, and when he reached the final 3 stances, he executed them without any hesitation. The elder's eyes lit up and he nodded his head. There was a hint of admiration in his eyes. Yes, not bad. You've mastered the flying cloud sword technique. You can choose a sword technique from the left sword pavilion. The elder's voice was still calm. Remember, you can only enter the first floor, and you only have an incense's time to make your choice. You are not allowed to destroy the books inside, or else you will be punished according to the sect rules. I'll remember it, elder. Nodding his head, the elder lit up an incense stick. Chu Mu quickly walked into the left sword pavilion. The first floor of the left sword pavilion was roughly 100 square meters in size. There were brown wooden shelves erected on the walls, and the shelves were divided into many compartments. There were a lot of cubicles, probably a few hundred, but most of them were empty. There were only about 50 to 60 cubicles for books. So little. Zhang Xian frowned. Recalling that he hadn't been in the left sword pavilion for too long, he hurriedly made his move. Other than the books in the compartments, there was also a note beside them. On it was written the names of the sword art, movement technique, and so on, so that it would be easier for those who entered the left sword pavilion to search for them. Spending half an incense's time, Zhang Xian roughly browsed through the 50 to 60 books. In addition to low-level sword techniques, there were also some movement techniques, footwork techniques, and so on. They were all at the low level. However, Chu Mu's main purpose in entering the left sword pavilion was to choose a sword art. Thus, he chose a low-tier sword art instead. The breeze sword art was also known as the 9 stances of the breeze. The first 7 stances didn't have a name, and the 8th and 9th stances were the essence of the entire sword art. They were known as the breeze blows and breeze kills. After picking up the book, Zhang Xian realized that he still had some time. He quickly walked over to the movement technique section, picked up a movement technique, and flipped through it. The fusion of their souls gave Chu Mu extraordinary memory. He had a photographic memory. Time's up. The elder's voice sounded, ignoring the distance between them. Chu Mu happened to flip to the last page of the movement technique, and all the words and diagrams were imprinted in his mind. He quickly put down the movement technique book and left the left sword pavilion with the breeze sword art. The breeze sword art is indeed a decent sword art. It's said that its prowess surpasses all other low-tier sword arts. However, it's easy to learn, but difficult to master. Over the past few decades, none of the disciples who chose this sword art have managed to learn it. That's because this sword art seems to be lacking something. The elder said with a hint of pity in his voice. Every disciple has a chance to change their sword art once every 3 days to a month. I suggest that you change your sword art when the time comes. Thank you for your kind intentions. The breeze sword art was something that Zhang Xian had picked out from dozens of low-tier sword arts. How could he change his sword art so easily? Okay. The elder handed the book over to Chu Mu. Although he felt a little pity, he didn't say anything about it. Remember, you have to return this sword art book within 3 months. You are not allowed to copy it. If you discover it, you will be punished according to the sect's rules. Otherwise, you will have to compensate for it. After Chu Mu received the book, he cupped his hands together and left with the book. This outer disciple actually managed to learn the soaring cloud sword art to the level of Deshang. How rare! After Chu Mu left, the sword pavilion guardian elder muttered to himself and sighed, "Chu Mu, let me check when he entered the sect." As he spoke, the elder started to check. Every disciple who joined the sword faction would receive the soaring cloud sword art. Naturally, there would be a registration. There were a few copies and the elder also had a copy. Chu Mu, 9th grade talent, joined the sect. The elder's eyes widened in shock. He rubbed his eyes and looked again to make sure that he wasn't seeing things. After a while, he calmed down and said, "He actually managed to learn the soaring cloud sword art to the level of Deshang in less than a month. Could it be that he had already come in contact with the soaring cloud sword art before he joined the sect? If that's not the case, it can only mean that he's a sword genius. He might be able to learn the breeze sword art that no one has been able to learn for the past 3 years. Unfortunately, his talent is too low. Whether he's a sword genius or not, let's see if he can learn the breeze sword art within 3 months." Chapter 5. In Mount Qinglan there were steep cliffs, pine trees, and a sea of clouds. A young man in a gray robe sat cross-legged on the brown ground, facing the sea of clouds. His face was calm and composed. His long black silky hair was tied into a ponytail with a piece of grass protruding from the back of his head. A few strands of black hair of different lengths were separated to the left and right of his forehead, revealing his full and smooth forehead. Because of the wind, the strands of hair on his forehead swayed gently. The gray-robed young man's body was straight, like a sword pointing to the sky, with a hint of sharpness that could pierce through the clouds. The steel sword and its scabbard were placed on his legs. His palms were facing up, his thumbs and index fingers were interlocked. His breathing was slow and even. Vaguely, there seemed to be wisps of white breath lingering in his nostrils. Chu Mu was practicing the energy-nurturing sword aura manual. A swordsman was composed of several aspects: sword aura manual, sword technique, movement, and footwork. Then the energy-nurturing sword aura manual cultivated the sword aura, which was the aura within the swordsman's body. The energy-nurturing sword aura manual was a low-grade yellow-class sword aura manual that Chu Mu practiced in the Chu family. It could be practiced up to the 7th stage of the sword aura realm. After that, if he wanted to continue practicing, he would have to change his manual. The sword aura cultivated by the energy-nurturing sword aura manual was neutral and peaceful. Its attack and defense were average, but the main thing was that it was not easy to make mistakes. It was stable, and although it was slow, it could build a solid foundation. After entering the Azure Edge Sword sect, there was a chance to change his manual. However, it was only a low-grade yellow-class sword aura manual, not much different from the energy-nurturing sword aura manual. Moreover, when changing a manual, one had to first disperse the original manual. Practicing a new manual would take a few days, and within a few days, one's strength would be severely reduced. Therefore, Chu Mu planned to practice the energy-nurturing sword aura manual to the 7th stage so that he could become an inner disciple and choose a better manual. A wisp of neutral and peaceful sword aura spread out from his dantian. Following the energy-nurturing sword aura manual's route, it moved through his meridians at an undetectable speed, little by little. After circulating the sword qi for 10 cycles, Zhang Xian felt a stinging pain in his meridians. Unable to bear it any longer, he stopped the circulation and sent a wisp of sword qi back into his dantian. His right hand moved inwards and landed on his dantian. His left hand also moved inwards and landed on top of his right hand. He slowly exhaled a faint white aura that looked like clouds and mist drifted out of his nostrils. He had finished adjusting his breathing. His eyes slowly opened, and a bright light flashed in the depths of his eyes like flowing water. It was so clear that one could see the bottom, reflecting the sea of clouds. In the past, when I was in the third phase, I was only able to circulate 3 minor circulations in a day. Even if you break through to the fourth stage, you will only be able to increase your circulation by 1 small cycle. Because every time you move, you need to be completely focused. It will consume your energy and make you tired. It will also put a burden on your meridians. Chu Mu's expression was indifferent. His gaze was distant as he muttered to himself, "As for me, after fusing with the soul of the original owner of this body, my soul has become many times stronger. I can complete 10 small circulations continuously, which is more than double the speed of an ordinary person. If it wasn't for the fact that this body's meridians are unable to bear it, I would be able to circulate a few more small circulations. As a result, my cultivation speed will be more than double that of an ordinary person. If I can strengthen my body and strengthen my meridians, my cultivation speed will increase even more. However, this 9th grade cultivation talent is too low. After 4 days of continuous cultivation, my cultivation speed is more than double that of an ordinary person's, but I don't feel any obvious progress." Zhang Xian felt somewhat helpless in his heart. If I have the assistance of pills, I should be able to cultivate even faster. However, it is very difficult to obtain pills. I should cultivate my sword techniques first. After I master the clear wind sword technique, I will go and make contributions to the sect to earn contribution points and exchange them for pills. As he spoke, his right hand grasped the hilt of his sword, and he casually pulled it out. The sound of metal clanging resounded, and a bright light blossomed. After pulling out and sheathing the sword 100 times, the scabbard flew out and stabbed into a crack in the mountain a few meters away. Zhang Xian's body followed the sword light, and he looked like a great rock spreading its wings. After 30 cycles of basic sword technique, Zhang Xian began to practice sword sight and sword hearing. After completing the sword master training, Zhang Xian began to practice the flying cloud sword technique. From the 1st to the 10th form, he followed up with gathering clouds, flying clouds, and scattering clouds. Not long after, Chu Mu finished practicing the flying cloud sword technique 10 times. Chu Mu once again sheathed his sword and closed his eyes to adjust his breathing. His breathing gradually calmed down and became even. In his mind, every movement of the clear wind sword technique began to flash, as clear and fast as a movie. Without any warning, Zhang Xian casually swung his sword. In an instant, it was as if a gust of wind had appeared out of nowhere. Zhang Xian and his sword moved with the wind, dancing with the wind. Whether it was a stab, a slash, or a slash, every move was clearly visible. Every move created a gust of wind. The gust of wind circled around Zhang Xian, and a faint green light could be seen circling around Zhang Xian's sword. Zhang Xian's sword moved faster and faster. Gradually, he couldn't see any clear traces of his sword. Zhang Xian's footsteps seemed to be messy. Every step he took was done with the tip of his foot. It was extremely nimble, and it complemented the clear wind sword technique, adding some changes to the clear wind sword technique. The chaotic scattered steps was a low-grade movement technique that Chu Mu had memorized in the Sword Firmament Pavilion. The chaotic scattered steps' characteristics lay in its fragmentation and chaos. Fragmentation meant that every step was short and the speed was fast. Chaos meant that it was messy and chaotic. But there was a pattern to it. The chaotic scattered steps and chaotic scattered steps were both basic movement technique. But when they were combined together, they formed the low-grade chaotic scattered step. In just 2 days, Zhang Xian was proficient in the chaotic scattered step. On the 3rd day, he improved the chaotic scattered step. Just like now, he could execute the chaotic scattered steps with the tip of his foot. With the chaotic scattered steps, Zhang Xian's sword technique had some changes. Strands of faint azure light fused together under his sword, forming a faint azure wind. Zhang Xian slowly slashed out with his sword. This faint azure wind blew forward with a faint whistling sound, causing the sand on the ground to roll up and down. Zhang Xian's sword was in this faint azure wind, emitting a cold aura. The eighth form of the clear wind sword technique, breeze brushing face. When the breeze brushed against the face, it was the moment when the cold sword was about to touch the body. The clear wind sword technique is much harder to cultivate than the soaring cloud sword technique. I only managed to grasp the eighth form after 4 days. But I still have no clue about the ninth form, Slay of the Clear Wind. It feels like there's a transition between the eighth and ninth forms. Could it really be like what the Sword Firmament Pavilion's elder said? Zhang Xian withdrew his sword and stood up. After adjusting his breath, he thought to himself, furthermore, using breeze brushing face actually consumed a third of my sword qi. But its power is 2 times stronger than the last 3 forms of the soaring cloud sword technique. I wonder how strong the Slay of the Clear Wind is? On the 4th day, this Chu Mu unexpectedly didn't come to change his sword technique. Could it be that he has the confidence to learn the Clear Wind sword technique? The Sword Pavilion Guardian Elder opened his eyes and muttered to himself. In his heart, he was somewhat expectant. Elder, I didn't manage to find the Clear Wind sword technique. Please inform me. A young swordsman in a cyan robe, about 17 or 18 years old, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. His body was as straight as the sword on his back. There was a hint of coldness and arrogance in his fierceness, and there was a sharp brilliance in his eyes. He walked out of the sword pavilion and cupped his hands to the elder. He seemed neither slow nor fast, neither salty nor indifferent. Xiao Qianfeng, didn't you practice the Clear Wind sword technique before? The elder took a look and saw that it was Xiao Qianfeng, who was somewhat famous among the inner disciples. You didn't manage to master it that day and changed to another sword technique. Why do you want the Clear Wind sword technique now? The elder had a deep impression of Xiao Qianfeng. Xiao Qianfeng was 18 years old, the son of a commoner. He had a cultivation talent of the 7th grade and was at the 8th stage of the sword qi realm. He could be considered a rare cultivation genius in the Azure Edge sword sect. Furthermore, Deshang only used 2 months to master the Soaring Cloud sword technique. After that, he chose the Clear Wind sword technique. 20 days later, he went to the Sword Firmament Pavilion to change his sword technique. According to the elder, he used 12 days to master the Slay of the Clear Wind and used the remaining 8 days to practice the Slay of the Clear Wind. Xiao Qianfeng was also a famous sword maniac in the Azure Edge sword sect. Now, after a few years, Xiao Qianfeng, who had already mastered a mid-grade sword technique, chose the Clear Wind sword technique again. The elder couldn't help but feel puzzled. The Slay of the Clear Wind is the 10th form. When I went out to train, I had a fortuitous encounter and obtained the 9th form. With the 9th form, I have an 80% chance of mastering the Slay of the Clear Wind. Xiao Qianfeng said simply. His voice didn't fluctuate and seemed very cold. However, there was also a trace of passion in his voice. Elder, please tell me where the Clear Wind sword technique is. I only want to see the Slay of the Clear Wind. The elder looked deeply at Xiao Qianfeng and muttered to himself. He had some understanding of Xiao Qianfeng. He was a commoner and had decent talent. Although he was a bit arrogant, he wouldn't bully others. Furthermore, the elder was very interested in the complete Clear Wind sword technique. I can tell you, but you have to remember that if the other party doesn't agree to your request, you can't use your strength or status to pressure them. The elder looked at Xiao Qianfeng and said seriously. Okay. Xiao Qianfeng replied seriously. Chapter 6. Greetings, Senior Brother Wang Lei. A disciple at Stage 4 Sword Qi Realm stopped and cupped his hands. Scram! His voice was filled with anger. His eyes were bloodshot and his face was extremely ferocious. He viciously glared at that disciple and his killing intent sword. He raised his sword and madly ran away. Anger filled his chest. Anger burned fiercely in his chest, accumulating and expanding. His blood boiled as if it was going to burn from the inside. He had never thought that a grasshopper that he could easily crush to death would actually make such a huge comeback in the few days that he was not around. Wang Lei had seriously injured his two followers, Wang Zhang and Wang Yi. There were more than a dozen wounds on their bodies. They were still lying on a bed in the Hall of Life because they had lost too much blood. More importantly, Chu Mu, a lowly grasshopper in his eyes, dared to injure his two followers. That was a provocation to him. According to Wang Zhang and Wang Yi, Chu Mu had arrogantly said in front of hundreds of outer sect disciples that he would first collect interest from them and then settle the rest of the account with him. What was this? What was this? Wang Lei's dignity was challenged like never before. This seriously affected the reputation he had built over the years. No wonder after he returned, many outer sect disciples seemed to look at him with less respect and more with something else. Turned out that it was all because of that grasshopper, that damned guy called Chu Mu. Chu Mu, you must pay a heavy price for your arrogance. Wang Lei roared in his heart and rushed back to the northern district. Look, isn't that senior brother Wang Lei? It looks like he's filled with anger and wants to kill someone. I know it must be because of Chu Mu. Chu Mu. I remember, he's the guy who unbelievably defeated Wang Zhang and Wang Yi. It must be his actions that angered Wang Lei. Oh no, Chu Mu is in trouble now. This is bad. WNG Lei is angry. Chu Mu is in danger. No, I have to find Chu Mu as soon as possible so that WNG Lei won't find him. Zhao Taimu and Wei Qian, who were about to leave the chore hall and return to the southern district, also saw WNG Lei. Their expressions changed. They looked at each other and immediately understood what each other meant. However, they did not know where Chu Mu had gone. Chu Mu, come out. Arriving at the northern district, WNG Lei roared. Suddenly, he grabbed the arm of a fourth-stage Sword Chi Realm disciple who was dodging beside him. With a ferocious expression, he asked, "Where is Chu Mu? Where did Chu Mu go? Tell him to come out immediately." Senior brother WNG Lei, I don't know either. The disciple was so scared that he was about to cry. WNG Lei had a fierce reputation in the outer court. Even disciples at the 6th stage of the Sword Chi realm were not willing to provoke him. Graham trash. He kicked the outer sanctum disciple away and roared, "Who knows where Chu Mu is? If you don't say, then you're offending me." Senior brother WNG Lei, Chu Mu. Chu Mu is back. He's right there. Suddenly, a 4th stage Sword Chi realm disciple ran over while panting. He pointed at WNG Lei as he spoke. Turning his head to look, he saw Chu Mu slowly walking over with a sword in his hand. Chu Mu. A furious roar exploded like thunder. His entire person rushed over like a fierce tiger descending the mountain. "Today, I won't kill you, but I will cut off the tendons in your arms and legs. I will make you a cripple and let you live a life worse than death. I will let you know the price of provoking me, WNG Lei." WNG Lei unsheathed his sword and an ear-piercing clanging sound reverberated in the air. He was incomparably fierce and cruel. Even though they were far away, many outer sanctum disciples retreated, afraid that they would be implicated. WNG Lei's roar also alarmed some of the outer sanctum disciples who were cultivating in their rooms. They came out to take a look. These outer sanctum disciples were either at the 5th or 6th stage of the Sword Chi realm. When they saw WNG Lei, their expressions changed slightly and a hint of fear flashed in their eyes. What they were afraid of was not WNG Lei himself, but WNG Lei's backer, inner sanctum disciple Wang Feng. Zhao Taimu and Wei Qian also saw Chu Mu. Their faces were filled with anxiety as they hurriedly shouted, "Chu Mu, leave quickly." Chu Mu gave them a reassuring look and stopped in his tracks. His expression was calm and his breathing was even. He was calm and unhurried. His clear eyes reflected WNG Lei's ferocious figure that was like a ferocious tiger. WNG Lei was rapidly approaching with a fierce and ruthless aura. It was suffocating. At this moment, WNG Lei seemed to have transformed into a sword demon. The sword in his hand was raised high and fiercely chopped down. It was like a ferocious tiger leaping into the air and brandishing its sharp claws. It was extremely powerful and wanted to tear its target apart. This sword was WNG Lei's venting of his anger. He used his full strength without any leeway. So scary. I can't take it anymore. He's going to die. Chu Mu is definitely going to die. I'm so scared. Some of the Outer Sanctum disciples, who were at the third stage of the Sword Chi realm, were trembling. This sword is so powerful. Even I can't take it. Many of the Outer Sanctum disciples, who were at the fifth stage of the Sword Chi realm, were shocked and felt a trace of fear. This sword is too ferocious. It didn't leave any leeway, and it was released with extreme anger. Even if my cultivation is one stage higher than WNG Lei's, I still have to retreat. Otherwise, I'll definitely be injured. Many of the Outer Sanctum disciples, who were at the sixth stage of the Sword Chi realm, thought so. Their hearts sank and they felt a little depressed. This guy at the fourth stage of the Sword Chi realm is going to be miserable. Even if he doesn't die, he'll be crippled. This was the thought of many of the Outer Sanctum disciples, who were at the fifth and sixth stage of the Sword Chi realm. This sword is indeed ferocious, but it's too ferocious. On the contrary, Xiao Qianfeng, who was walking over, happened to see this scene. However, he didn't know who made the move and why. In short, within the Qingfeng sword sect, as long as it didn't cause disability or death, the sword sect wouldn't care. Therefore, all kinds of exchanges could be seen everywhere. However, with a cultivation at the fifth stage of the Sword Chi realm, even an opponent of the same cultivation level would find it difficult to resist such a sword attack. Not to mention a disciple at the fourth stage of the Sword Chi realm. This disciple will definitely be injured. He used all his strength in this sword attack and didn't hold back at all. He wants to kill me. Chu Mu's expression didn't change, but he was secretly angry. The power is indeed very strong, but it's too ferocious. It lost the essence of the sword and is full of flaws. I can easily break it. Since you didn't hold back at all, then I won't hold back either. Although I won't kill you, I'll make it so that you won't be able to use a sword in the future. He opened his eyes and a sharp light burst out from them. His right hand grabbed the sword hilt at an unbelievable speed and pulled it out. A melodious sound rang out, as if it came from the heavens. A snow-white sword light drew an arc in the air. What a fast sword-drawing speed! Xiao Qianfeng's heart trembled. His expression changed slightly, and his pupils instantly contracted. His left hand subconsciously tightened. Using the art of deflection and the art of vibration, the blade of the sword chopped down on the weak point of WNG Lei's sword. An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing rang out. WNG Lei's sword trembled slightly, and sparks flew. The sure-kill sword attack was actually broken by Chu Mu, and WNG Lei's body leaned to one side. Impossible! The spectating outer court disciples, no matter what level of cultivation, all widened their eyes as these three words appeared in their minds. What sharp eyesight, what high attainments in sword arts, what ingenious timing! Xiao Qianfeng's face was filled with the word good. He felt that even if he were to attack, he wouldn't be able to do so in terms of pure sword arts. However, when he was at the fourth level of the Sword Chi realm, he was far from having this kind of ability. In an instant, Xiao Qianfeng's eyes flashed with an intense light. He could vaguely feel his heart tremble and his blood speed up. It was the feeling of seeing one of his own kind, or perhaps prey. Kill. WNG Lei, whose sword attack was broken, became even more furious. He forcibly stopped his body and fiercely swung his steel sword. Every strike was made with all of his strength, as if he wouldn't stop until he killed Chu Mu. Using the chaotic steps, His seemingly disorderly and broken footsteps quickly alternated, creating a wisp of wind as he dodged WNG Lei's sword. Kill! WNG Lei's body fiercely twisted as he roared. He withdrew his sword and unsheathed it. Sword light flashed as a ferocious tiger appeared in the air. It opened its bloody mouth and let out a terrifying roar that shook everyone's eardrums. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the tiger seemed to want to devour Chu Mu as it quickly charged towards Chu Mu along with WNG Lei's sword. So he cultivates the ferocious tiger sword art. Chu Mu understood. It's here. Senior brother WNG Lei's killing move, Tiger Roar Frenzy. Many outer court disciples were extremely excited. The ferocious tiger sword art is close to Deshang's. Xiao Qianfeng took a glance and knew WNG Lei's attainments in the ferocious tiger sword art. Xiao Qianfeng didn't dodge. A sharp light flashed in the corner of his eyes as he instantly saw WNG Lei's sword move clearly. Xiao Qianfeng's pupils contracted as he casually thrust his sword forward. It was as if he was a heavenly steed soaring through the skies, leaving no trace behind. A soft whistling sound rang out as countless fine, light green threads appeared around Xiao Qianfeng's body. In an instant, they merged into a light green wind and blew forward. A cool breeze blew past, brushing against Xiao Qianfeng's face. The ferocious tiger that was roaring and choosing its target to devour actually twisted and struggled painfully under the cool breeze. It was as if smoke was being blown into disorder by a passing breeze, or as if black ink was being washed away by clear water. In the end, it disappeared into the air without a trace. Impossible! WNG Lei was stunned. His eyes and mouth were wide open as he couldn't react in time. Cool breeze. Xiao Qianfeng's expression was incomparably solemn as he roared madly in his heart. Deshang, cool breeze. From now on, you no longer have the right to practice the sword. The soft words were like a cool breeze that brushed past Xiao Qianfeng's ears. A cold killing intent flashed through Xiao Qianfeng's body, causing WNG Lei's hair to flutter. He couldn't help but shiver as his expression changed greatly. His eyes were filled with fear as he subconsciously blurted out, "You can't kill me." Two soft sounds spread out along with the cool breeze, accompanied by WNG Lei's blood-curdling scream and the clanging sound of the steel sword hitting the ground. Chu Mu's sword caused 2 drops of blood to fly and drip to the ground. WNG Lei's hands drooped down as his entire body trembled. There were 2 wounds on his wrists that dripped with blood. Chapter 7. Chu Mu! Chu Mu! How dare you injure me? How dare you injure me? You're dead, you're definitely dead. Blood dripped from WNG Lei's hands. His face twitched continuously due to the pain, and his eyes were red as if they were dripping blood. He wailed miserably, causing others to shudder. I'm not injuring you. I'm just severing the tendons in your hands. From now on, you'll never be able to practice the sword again. The indifferent voice was like a bomb that exploded in deep water. It shocked all the onlookers. They all gasped and their expressions changed. Severing the tendons in my hands, severing the tendons in my hands. Ha 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 ha. WNG Lei laughed loudly as if he had gone mad. His entire body twitched and his hair was disheveled. Blood seemed to drip from the corners of his eyes. He was incomparably resentful. Chu Mu, what you've done to me, I'll return it to you tenfold. Just you wait. WNG Lei turned around amidst his endless resentment and curses towards Chu Mu. He laughed loudly and slowly left as if he was sobbing. His back was so mournful, so chilling, and so terrifying. He actually severed the tendons in his hands. From now on, WNG Lei will probably be crippled. Yeah, once the tendons in your hands are severed, unless you have some sort of extraordinary treasure, there's no way to recover them. Being unable to recover means that you can't use your strength or practice the sword. For a swordsman, this is crueler than death. How ruthless. He severed the tendons in WNG Lei's hands without hesitation. Bullshit. Every strike of WNG Lays was meant to kill Chu Mu. If Chu Mu still let him go, then he'd be too stupid. The onlookers discussed softly and whispered to each other. Although WNG Lay's cultivation is a level higher than mine, he doesn't have an overwhelming advantage. His attainments in the sword are too far away from mine. It's not something that can be made up for by a level higher. Therefore, he's no match for me at all. It looks like my current strength should be able to fight someone at the 6th level of the Sword Chi realm. Looking at WNG Lay's miserable back and the blood that kept dripping, his expression was still indifferent. However, his thoughts were still spinning in his mind. Right now, the one who's a real threat to me is WNG Lay's backer, Wang Feng, who's at the 8th level of the Sword Chi realm. With such a cultivation base, he could ignore my attainments in swordsmanship and crush me directly. Fortunately, Wang Feng has yet to return. I must do my best to raise my cultivation and strength before Wang Feng returns. Otherwise, it will be dangerous. Take my sword. With a light shout, a cold light shot out. A beam of snow-white light shot out in a straight line. It was like an aurora shooting out from outer space. It was so sharp that one could feel a piercing pain on one's skin before it even got close. He hurriedly drew his sword, drawing an arc of light as he slashed out. Clang! 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 3 consecutive ear-piercing sounds of metal colliding rang out, shaking the air and sending sparks flying. The shadows of the swords flickered and intertwined. The 2 figures' footsteps were either messy or erratic. They crossed each other and stopped. They pointed their swords at the ground and faced each other head-on. There were 3 obvious nicks on Chu Mu's steel sword. Green robe, inner disciple. His eyes narrowed as he thought to himself, could he be Wang Feng? No, his sword didn't have any killing intent. It was purely probing. He didn't use any sword chi. Xiao Qianfeng stared coldly at Chu Mu. There was a trace of fanaticism in his eyes. Others might not have been able to see the level of sword skill Chu Mu had displayed in his battle with Wang Lei, but Xiao Qianfeng was very clear about it. This level of sword skill attainment had already made him unable to restrain himself. He was itching to make a move and couldn't wait to attack. However, Chu Mu was only at the 4th stage of the Sword Chi realm. There was a difference of 4 stages between the 2 of them. The difference in strength was completely immeasurable. In the 10th stage of the Sword Chi realm, there was a huge gap between the 3rd and 4th stage. The gap between the 6th and 7th stage was even bigger. The gap between the 6th and 7th stage was even more obvious. The gap between the 8th and 7th stage was even bigger than the gap between the 7th and 6th stage. In the end, Xiao Qianfeng couldn't control himself and attacked. However, he didn't use any sword chi. He only attacked with his sword skills. He didn't have any intention of harming Chu Mu. It was very simple. His hands were itchy and he wanted to fight with Chu Mu. In an instant, the swords of both sides quickly clashed 3 times. It was so fast that the surrounding people didn't even have time to react. What happened just now? An outer court disciple rubbed his eyes with a puzzled expression. It seems like someone fought with Chu Mu. That's an azure gown. An outer court disciple exclaimed, startling the other outer court disciples. They all reacted and turned pale with fright. Disciples below the 4th stage of the Sword Chi realm wear gray cloth robes, 4th stage to 6th stage wear gray long robes, and only 7th stage to 10th stage can wear green long robes and white long robes. These are the symbols of inner sect disciples, male and female. He is an inner sect disciple. I wonder which courtyard he's from? Inner court disciples were at least at the 7th stage of the Sword Chi realm. They enjoyed the important nurturing of the sword sect. All these things made the outer court disciples envious. Moreover, compared to the outer court disciples, inner court disciples were all high and mighty. They simply disdained to come to the outer court disciples' residential area. The outer court disciples all held their breaths as they looked at Xiao Qianfeng with various expressions of admiration, envy, and reverence. "You're Chu Mu." Xiao Qianfeng opened his mouth. His voice was still so cold. "I'm Xiao Qianfeng." Xiao Qianfeng? Chu Mu had only joined the sect for a short time and had never heard of this name. Xiao Qianfeng? Many outer court disciples revealed puzzled and thoughtful expressions. Suddenly, their bodies trembled as they came to a sudden realization. "Xiao Qianfeng, I know. He's our Azure Edge Sword Sect's genius sword maniac. He's 18 years old and his cultivation is at the 8th stage of the Sword Qi realm. It's said that when he was at the 7th stage of the Sword Qi realm, he once defeated a senior brother at the 8th stage of the Sword Qi realm. Chu Mu is doomed this time. Severing the tendons in WNG Lei's hand is equivalent to offending senior brother Wang Feng. When senior brother Wang Feng returns, he will definitely look for Chu Mu. At that time, it will be Chu Mu's doomsday. I didn't expect that before senior brother Wang Feng returned, Chu Mu would actually offend another inner court disciple. Moreover, it's senior brother Xiao Qianfeng, who is even more powerful than senior brother Wang Feng. There was an indescribable sense of schadenfreude in their tone. Although the discussion wasn't loud, Chu Mu still heard it. Only then did he realize the identity of the person in front of him. He couldn't help but be surprised. Being able to defeat an opponent at the 8th stage of the Sword Qi realm at the 7th stage of the Sword Qi realm meant that his sword skills were extraordinary. Moreover, from the 3 sword exchanges earlier, Chu Mu could also determine that this person's sword skills far surpassed WNG Lei's. However, he didn't have any interactions with Xiao Qianfeng. Why would he look for him? "Chu Mu, the breeze sword art is in your hands. Let me take a look first," Xiao Qianfeng said very directly. Chu Mu actually chose to cultivate the breeze sword art? He already mastered the soaring cloud sword art? It seems that Chu Mu only entered the sect for less than a month. Maybe he already cultivated the soaring cloud sword art before he entered the sect. That must be the case. That's why he was able to master the soaring cloud sword art in less than a month. However, he's really stupid to choose the breeze sword art. What a waste of time. The outer court disciples started to discuss one after another. Their words were filled with disdain. However, Zhao Taimu and Wei Qian were incomparably shocked. As Chu Mu's roommates, they clearly knew that Chu Mu didn't cultivate the soaring cloud sword art before he entered the sect. Therefore, for a moment they felt as if they were dreaming. Catch. After pondering for a moment, he took out a book and threw it to Xiao Qianfeng. Xiao Qianfeng caught it and flipped to the end. He vaguely felt that Xiao Qianfeng should be reading The Death of the Breeze. Could it be that he cultivated the breeze sword art before, but he didn't manage to master it? Chu Mu couldn't help but guess. The outer court disciples' discussion gradually calmed down. They all looked at Xiao Qianfeng, not understanding what was going on. "I heard that senior brother Xiao also cultivated the breeze sword art before, but he didn't manage to master it. Could it be that he has the confidence to master it now?" An outer court disciple who was more well-informed said thoughtfully, "However, I heard that senior brother Xiao already cultivated an intermediate sword art. Why is he still looking at the breeze sword art? Could it be that there's some secret to the breeze sword art?" After a while, Xiao Qianfeng had already looked at The Death of the Breeze sword art several times. In addition to his previous memories, he quickly memorized the entire Death of the Breeze sword art. Soon after, he raised his head and looked at Chu Mu. "Chu Mu, your sword art is extremely exquisite. I admire it. Let's make a bet." Xiao Qianfeng suddenly said as he closed the book. Without waiting for Chu Mu to speak, he continued, "Let's bet on who can master the breeze sword art first. If you win, you'll have the right to contribute the entire breeze sword art to the sword faction. If you lose, you'll only have to agree to one of my conditions. Do you dare?" This was Xiao Qianfeng. He was usually cold and indifferent, but when it came to sword art, It was as if he was a completely different person. That was why he was called a madman. His eyes were sharp and threatening, like the edge of a sword pressing down on Chu Mu. The outer court disciples all held their breath. This moment belonged to Chu Mu. Okay. Without any hesitation, Xiao Qianfeng agreed. A light smile hung on the corner of Xiao Qianfeng's mouth. Soon after throwing the Breeze Sword art book, he took out a folded piece of white paper and flicked it towards Chu Mu. Xiao Qianfeng turned around and left in large strides, only leaving behind a sentence, "We'll see the results half a month later." Catching the book and white paper, a smile flashed across Xiao Qianfeng's face as he looked at Xiao Qianfeng's departing figure. Soon after, he walked back to his wooden house. As for Zhao Taimu and Wei Qian, they looked at each other as they looked at Chu Mu's departing figure. Suddenly, they bitterly laughed. There was an indescribable feeling in their hearts. This day was destined to be the day that Chu Mu's name would spread throughout the outer court. Chapter 8. Chu Mu's name spread throughout the outer court and was spread by many outer court disciples. All the outer court disciples remembered his name and discussed Chu Mu's deeds. For a moment, Chu Mu was in the limelight. Why do you guys think Chu Mu is so powerful? He hasn't even been in the sect for a month. Look at me, I've been in the sect for almost a year and I've only just mastered the Soaring Cloud sword art. You have to admit that some people are born geniuses and are destined to surpass ordinary people. In my opinion, Chu Mu's sword attainments can probably be called number one among the outer court disciples. A disciple at the fourth stage of the Sword Chi realm said. Number one among the outer court disciples in sword skills? Yes, with a cultivation at the fourth stage of the Sword Chi realm, he defeated Wang Lei, who was at the fifth stage of the Sword Chi realm in a few moves. He can even exchange a few moves with the inner court disciple's senior brother Xiao Qianfeng, who is known as a sword maniac. He is indeed worthy of this title. Thus, the title of number one among the outer court disciples in sword skills fell on Chu Mu's head just like that. Naturally, among the outer sect disciples, there were many fifth and sixth stage Sword Chi realm disciples who were unconvinced. However, being unconvinced was one thing. The most important thing was that they didn't have the confidence to defeat Chu Mu in terms of sword techniques. Wang Lei was infamous among the outer court disciples. On one hand, it was indeed because of Wang Feng. On the other hand, it was because of Wang Lei's own strength. There were very few who could compete with Wang Lei at the fifth stage of the Sword Chi realm. However, even Wang Lei was defeated by Chu Mu in a few moves, not to mention the other outer court disciples at the fifth stage of the Sword Chi realm. As for the outer court disciples at the sixth stage of the Sword Chi realm, they also subconsciously felt that they were inferior to Chu Mu in terms of sword skills. Therefore, now that Chu Mu was crowned with the title of number one among the outer court disciples in sword skills, even though some people were unconvinced, they could not use their cultivation to suppress others. After all, it was number one among the outer court disciples in sword skills, and not number one among the outer court disciples in sword skills. Number one among the outer court disciples in sword skills? We have to ask senior brother Li Yang if he agrees. A disciple at the sixth stage of the Sword Chi realm coldly snorted and said unconvinced. That's right. Senior brother Li Yang is publicly acknowledged as the number one outer disciple. What does this mean? This means that no matter if it's cultivation or swordsmanship, senior brother Li Yang is the undisputed number one among the outer court disciples. He's not someone that Chu Mu, who suddenly appeared, can compare to. Another disciple at the sixth level of the Sword Chi realm was unconvinced. Although Chu Mu defeated Wang Lei, senior brother Li Yang has the battle record of not falling into a disadvantageous position when he fought against a seventh-level Sword Chi expert while being at the sixth level of the Sword Chi realm. The gap between the seventh and sixth level of the Sword Chi realm is much greater than the gap between the fifth and fourth level. That's right. If senior brother Li Yang hadn't gone out to train these few days, Chu wouldn't have the chance to be so arrogant. When senior brother Liang returns, Chu won't be able to continue jumping around. In my opinion, there is no need for senior brother Liang to make a move. We only need to wait for senior brother Yang Yi to return, and that will be enough to deal with Chu. That's right. Although senior brother Yang Yi is not as good as senior brother Liang, he can be considered as the second strongest outer disciple. A cool breeze blew over the precipice and the endless sea of clouds. Chu held his sword and stood facing the wind. As he watched the sea of clouds churn and change, the astonishment in his heart had yet to subside. The fine steel sword in his hand had been replaced by Wang Lei's because his own sword had been cut 3 times by Shao Qianfeng after exchanging blows with him 3 times. It wasn't that his swordsmanship was inferior to Shao Qianfeng's, but rather that the quality of his fine steel sword was inferior to Shao Qianfeng's sword. From defeating Wang Lei to Shao Qianfeng's sudden attack, to Shao Qianfeng's request to view the clear wind sword technique, to the wager, and so on, everything made Chu feel dizzy. Everything happened too suddenly. However, there was no loss in letting Shao Qianfeng view the clear wind sword art. Moreover, there was no enmity between him and Shao Qianfeng, so he might as well do Shao Qianfeng a favor. When Shao Qianfeng proposed the wager, he mentioned the complete clear wind sword art. His heart moved, and he agreed to Shao Qianfeng's wager without hesitation. What he didn't expect was that the contents of the folded white paper Shao Qianfeng threw over was actually one of the moves of the clear wind sword art. Moreover, it wasn't one of the moves in the book. He couldn't help but admire Shao Qianfeng's breadth of mind. Even he wasn't sure if he would be willing to give it to someone else, let alone someone who had a wager with him. From this point, not only did he see Shao Qianfeng's breadth of mind, he also saw his confidence in himself. Dazzling Breeze was the true 9th move of the clear wind sword art. As for the clear wind kill, it was actually the 10th move of the clear wind sword art. After he finished reading the Dazzling Breeze, he finally realized that the clear wind sword art he found in the sword art pavilion was incomplete. It was missing the 9th move, which was the move between the clear wind stroke and the clear wind kill. No wonder I couldn't figure out the clear wind kill after learning the clear wind stroke. It's because it's missing one of the moves, Dazzling Breeze. Not only does this move surpass the clear wind stroke in terms of power, it's also the bridge between the clear wind stroke and the clear wind kill. As long as I can learn Dazzling Breeze, I'll be able to comprehend the clear wind kill. While the outside world was discussing Chu's title of number 1 outer disciple in sword arts, he was completely unaware that he was already immersed in the world of sword arts. Closing his eyes and eliminating all distracting thoughts, he carefully recalled the essentials of Dazzling Breeze's movements. He opened his eyes and a bright light flickered. He raised his hand and drew his sword. A cool breeze arose, a cool breeze rose, and the cool breeze moved. The clear wind sword art was displayed one move after another. The 8th move, clear wind stroke, blew a light green wind, causing sand and dust to fly. The sword light turned and the fierce killing intent in the cool breeze split into 2. The 2 fierce killing intents formed 2 cold and sharp shadows. They intertwined with each other in the light green wind, forming a cross slash that tore through the air. I've mastered the basics of Dazzling Breeze, but I haven't mastered Desheng yet. Yi Chen sheathed his sword and stood up. Using Desheng's clear wind stroke to practice Dazzling Breeze didn't seem to be difficult. However, Desheng's Dazzling Breeze split into 8 different moves. Using clear wind stroke and Dazzling Breeze consecutively consumed nearly 2/3 of my sword chi. I'll recover my sword chi first, then continue practicing. Sitting down cross-legged, Yi Chen cleared all distracting thoughts and started practicing the chi cultivation sword art. His current cultivation was still at the early stage of the 4th stage. There was only a slight improvement. Today's practice of the sword chi had already ended. Like before, he had only completed 10 cycles. His current practice was to recover his sword chi. Therefore, he couldn't do 10 cycles like before. After the 9th cycle, his sword chi had completely recovered and he started practicing the clear wind sword art again. He repeated this cycle. On the 30th cycle, clear wind stroke was displayed. The cold killing intent split into 2, then into 4. The 4 killing intents intertwined with each other, increasing the power. Dazzling breeze, minor completion. Yi Chun recovered his sword chi and started practicing again. A killing move like this that consumes sword chi was even more troublesome to practice. After all, the sword chi wasn't endless and needed to be recovered. Clear wind stroke, dazzling breeze has reached minor completion, but it's already late. It seems like I can't do Dashang today. I'll recover my sword chi first, then return to the wooden house to rest. Tomorrow I'll continue practicing. Chu Mu's eyes shone with a sharp light as he sat down cross-legged again. At this time, night had already fallen. The sea of clouds was deep and the sky was filled with stars. The moonlight was like a veil, covering the earth and mountains. Chapter 9. When the sun had just risen in the east, the sky was still dark. The door of a wooden house in the north district of the outer disciples opened gently. A tall figure walked out and closed the door. Every day, Chu Mu would wake up at the crack of dawn. After washing his face and rinsing his mouth, he would put on his clothes, hang up his water bottle, and bring the dried rations and meat that he had already packed from the canteen. He would then carry his sword and leave the wooden hut, heading towards the precipice to train. Only when the sun had set and night had fallen did he return to the wooden house to end the day's training. A true genius was 1 point of talent and 9 points of hard work, no matter which world he was in. What others saw was his achievements. Who would know the hard work he had put in? His footsteps were quick and light as he left. In less than half an hour, he had arrived at the cliff. At this time, the sky was still dark. The sea of clouds seemed to still be in a deep sleep. It was condensed and motionless. The wind that blew carried the chill from last night. The cold wind blew against his face and touched his hair. His whole body quivered, and he became much more energetic. Facing the sea of clouds, he slowly closed his eyes. His mind was clear. After reviewing his training experience from yesterday, he slowly opened his eyes. He saw a ray of light that was like a sword piercing through the sky. It floated above the sea of clouds and dispelled the darkness, waking up the sleeping sea of clouds. In an instant, the sea of clouds woke up. The darkness disappeared. It floated, boiled, and changed again. A rolling red sun slowly rose from the east. Thousands of rays of light shone like countless blazing swords. The slowly rising red sun was reflected in his clear eyes. He was full of vitality. Now is the time when my body is fully awake. It is also the best time to train sword chi. Facing the sea of clouds, he sat down cross-legged. The steel sword was placed on his legs. He slowly closed his eyes. His thumb and index finger were interlocked. His palms were placed on his knees. His breathing became long and even. A strand of sword chi rushed out of his dantian and circulated around his body. 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 10 cycles. After a while, he finished adjusting his breathing. He quickly stood up and drew his sword. Sword light flashed, reflecting the sunlight. It was a dazzling red. After that, the flying cloud sword technique was compulsory. 10 times a day. Breeze swordsmanship. Currently, Zhang Xian focused on swordsmanship. After practicing the first 7 moves 30 times, he moved on to breeze brushing face, dazzling breeze, and breeze kill. On the 2nd day, Dashang was dazzled by the cool breeze. On the 3rd day, he started to practice the absolute kill of the cool breeze. On the 4th day. On the 7th day, he gained enlightenment. The absolute kill of the cool breeze was to condense the 8 strands of killing intent into one, and shoot out like a wind blade from the separation sword. On the 8th day, Zhang Xian failed to condense the heaven's path. On the 9th day, Zhang Xian still failed to condense the heaven's path. On the 10th day, which was today, after the sword chi had fully recovered, he once again used the wind blows in the face, the wind dazzles the wind. 8 chilling murderous intense condensed, in the blink of an eye, 8 became 4, 4 became 2, and 2 became 1. However, it went out of control and exploded. It failed again, and only a tiny strand of sword chi was left in his dantian. Zhang Xian sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. First, he recovered his sword chi. Then, he carefully recalled each of his movements and simulated them in his mind. After a moment, he opened his eyes. A ray of sword light shot out. He leaped up and struck out with his sword once again. A cool breeze blew past, stirring up the sand. The wind was chaotic, and the murderous intents were divided. 1, 2, 4, 8. In an instant, his body moved along with his sword light. Under Chu Mu's sword, the 8 strands of sword light gathered once again. In an instant, 8 became 4, 4 became 2, and 2 became 1, attaching themselves to the sword. Absolute kill of the cool breeze. When the 8 strands of murderous intents gathered and attached themselves to the sword, Zhang Xian felt the sword in his hand become heavy, as if it was about to fly out of his hand. With a low shout, all the strength in his body rushed to his right arm. His muscles swelled, and he barely managed to hold the steel sword. With a loud shout, he turned around and swung his sword. With a swoosh, a half-meter-long cyan arc of light tore through the air like a crescent moon. Its speed was so fast that it flew 5 or 6 meters away in the blink of an eye. It hit the target and dodged. With a crack, the half-meter-long wind blade cut into the hard mountain wall. Broken stones flew everywhere, and the light blue light dissipated, leaving behind a half-meter-long, a finger-wide, and an inch-deep crack. Phew! Zhang Xian let out a breath. He felt a little weak. At that moment, it was as if all the strength in his body had been shot out with that wind blade. The sword chi in his dantian had been completely consumed. With my current cultivation, I can only use absolute kill of the cool breeze once. After that, I will lose 80% of my strength. It is too dangerous, so I can't use it easily. Chu Mu thought, however, the power of absolute kill of the cool breeze is dozens of times stronger than dispersing clouds, and 10 times stronger than gentle breeze. This doesn't seem to be the power of a low-level sword art. Could it be that the complete clear breeze sword art is an intermediate-level sword art? Zhang Xian's heart burned when he thought of the possibility of it being an intermediate-level sword art. Not every inner disciple had an intermediate-level sword art. Most of the inner disciples were still practicing low-level sword art. Zhang Xian first recovered his sword chi, then ate some rations and drank some water. After a short rest, he started cultivating again. Every time he used absolute kill of the cool breeze, he would use up all the sword chi in his dantian, and it would also exhaust all his strength. 3 days later, he used absolute kill of the cool breeze again. The tip of his sword swept out, and a half-meter-long wind blade tore through the air, leaving an inch-deep crack on the hard mountain wall. Chu Mu's expression didn't change. Although he had used up all the sword chi in his dantian, he still had more than half of his strength left. Compared to 3 days ago, he was in a much better state. After 3 days of cultivation and comprehension, he had a better grasp of the essentials of absolute kill of the cool breeze. There are still 2 more days until half a month. I wonder if Xiao Qianfeng has also mastered absolute kill of the cool breeze? Zhang Xian straightened his body and pointed the sword in his right hand to the ground. He faced the sea of clouds and thought to himself, if he has mastered it, with Xiao Qianfeng's cultivation at the 8th stage of the sword chi realm, he should be able to use absolute kill of the cool breeze multiple times. Furthermore, the power of his absolute kill of the cool breeze should be even stronger than mine. After all, the sword chi at the 4th stage of the sword chi realm couldn't be compared to the sword chi at the 8th stage of the sword chi realm. Whether it was in terms of quantity or quality, there was a huge difference. Even if they consumed the same amount of sword chi, the might of the 8th stage sword chi would be much stronger than that of the 4th stage sword chi. After 13 days of hard training, especially in the past 3 days, every time I used absolute kill of the breeze, I would use up all of my sword chi and then recover it. My sword chi has improved a lot compared to 13 days ago, and I'm not far from the middle stage of the 4th stage. If I maintain this speed, I'll probably only need 10 days to reach the middle stage. At that time, my sword chi will increase by a bit. As he spoke, he slowly closed his eyes and stood there. A cool breeze blew on his face, rustling his hair and body, causing his clothes to flutter. All the thoughts in his mind seemed to be carried away by the wind. His entire body felt as if it was riding the wind. What is wind? Suddenly, a thought floated into his mind as if it was carried by the wind. Soon after, these 3 words lingered in his heart and reverberated in his mind. In his mind, strands of azure appeared naturally. They appeared from nothingness and gathered together, condensing into an azure figure. The figure tightly held an azure longsword in his hand and started to dance. Like a gust of wind, he practiced the cool breeze sword art. From the 1st style to the 7th style, the cool breeze brushed against the face. The cool breeze became chaotic. The absolute kill of the cool breeze was practiced over and over again. As he practiced, the azure figure exploded and turned into an azure wind. Breeze, breeze, gale, gale. Hurricane Zhang Xian felt as if he was surrounded by countless winds. The entire world was filled with wind, and only the whistling of the azure wind could be heard. What is wind? Breeze, breeze, gale, 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 hurricane. They are all wind. All kinds of wind form the ocean of wind, the world of wind. Wind is formless and formless, boundless, all-pervasive, and omnipresent. Zhang Xian opened his eyes. It seemed as if a gust of wind blew past his eyes. Zhang Xian waved his sword, bringing along a gust of wind. Zhang Xian waved his sword again. There was no sword shadow, only a gust of wind. Chu Mu felt as if he had comprehended something. It was related to the mysteries of wind. Absolute kill of the cool breeze. With a thought, Zhang Xian turned around and waved his sword. The sword emitted a faint azure glow. Immediately after, a gust of wind gathered at the tip of the sword. A half-a-meter-long azure wind blade flew out from the sword. In the blink of an eye, it cut into the hard mountain wall 7 to 8 meters away. With a cracking sound, broken rocks flew everywhere. The azure light blade shattered, leaving behind a half-a-meter-long, a finger-wide, and an inch-deep crack. This sword was actually half as strong as before. Chapter 10. The outer court disciples were divided into the north and south districts, but there was only one cafeteria. However, the cafeteria was clearly divided into east and west. The west side was for the south side disciples, and the east side was for the north side disciples. To be honest, this was the first time Chu Mu was able to sit comfortably on a chair on the east side after moving to the north side. He was able to relax and enjoy the food. Memories told him that Chu Mu used to sit on the west side and admire the east side. Now, he was sitting on the east side. Things had changed, but he had fulfilled a small wish of the original owner. The food on the east side is indeed incomparable to the food on the west side. He thought as he ate. The original owner's memories told him that the food on the west side was very ordinary. It was like a common meal, but it was enough to fill one's stomach. On the other hand, the food on the east side was meticulously cooked. Whether it was the ingredients, the taste, or the nourishment, they were all better than the food on the west side. They could nourish the body and replenish the energy consumed during daily cultivation. For example, honey-steamed bear paw, tiger bone ginseng soup, and so on. The taste was not inferior to the food personally made by the chef of a star hotel on Earth. From this point, it could be seen that the sword faction treated disciples who had not reached the fourth stage of the sword chi realm differently. It was very simple. Anyone who was willing to cultivate could reach the third stage of the sword chi realm. However, not everyone could reach the fourth stage of the sword chi realm. A swordsman could only be considered to have touched the surface of a swordsman after cultivating to the fourth stage. They were barely qualified to be called a swordsman. Today was the 15th day since Xiao Qianfeng made the bet. It was also the 19th day since Chu Mu broke through the fourth stage and entered the north side. In these 19 days, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Now, Deshang with the soaring cloud sword art and Deshang with the clear wind sword art felt that they had touched upon a deeper level of mysteries related to the mysteries of the wind. This caused the clear wind sword art's power to increase by several times. With this kind of strength, he should be able to defeat an outer court disciple at the 6th stage of the sword chi realm. As for the 7th stage, the gap was too big. Chu Mu could not estimate, but one thing was certain. If an inner court disciple at the 7th stage of the sword chi realm took the full force of the clear wind sword art head-on, even if they did not die, they would be seriously injured. After making some progress, Chu Mu only cultivated for half a day. He planned to give himself half a day off, so he came here to eat. Naturally, Chu Mu became the center of attention at the first moment. There was a lot of discussion, but he didn't care. Injuring Wang Chang, Wang Yi, and severing Wang Lei's tendons, the upper echelons of the sword faction didn't seem to have any reaction. Does this mean that this kind of matter isn't at the level of breaking the sex rules, or is there some other reason? And Wang Feng, it seems that he hasn't returned to the sword sect yet. As he ate, he suddenly thought of this matter and thought to himself, no matter what, it's best if there's no reaction. It'll save me a lot of trouble. In the afternoon, after the bet with Xiao Qianfeng was completed, Xiao Qianfeng's expression changed. If I win, I'll go to Sword Pavilion and contribute Dazzling Breeze to get contribution points. I'll use the contribution points to exchange for pills to improve my sword chi cultivation. Then, I'll go out to train. If I lose, I'll see what Xiao Qianfeng's conditions are before making my decision. However, it's impossible for me to lose. If it was before he had comprehended some of the mysteries of the wind, he might not have dared to be certain. However, after comprehending some of the mysteries of the wind, he was completely confident that he would win. Chu Mu, get out here and face your death. Suddenly, a loud shout filled with murderous intent rang out from outside the cafeteria. It shook the cafeteria, and there was a faint rumble of thunder. Chu Mu raised his head to look, but he ignored it. Instead, he picked up a piece of bear paw meat and put it in his mouth. Who dares to tell Chu Mu to get out here and face his death? Doesn't he know that Chu Mu is now the #1 sword cultivator among us outer disciples? An outer disciple whispered. Who knows? At this time, a figure hurriedly ran in and rushed towards Chu Mu. It was Zhao Taimu, and he had a panicked and anxious expression on his face. Chu Mu, leave through the back door quickly. Wang Feng has returned and is looking for you outside. Zhao Taimu hurriedly shouted when he saw Chu Mu raise his head to look at him. Wang Feng has returned. Chu Mu's heart relaxed. What was meant to come would come in the end. Immediately, he put down his chopsticks, grabbed his sword, stood up, and strode towards the main entrance of the cafeteria. Chu Mu, the back door is over there. Leave through the back door. Zhao Taimu hurriedly blocked Chu Mu's way and said hurriedly, Brother Zhao, a swordsman should have a sharp edge. He turned around and naturally avoided Zhao Taimu's block. At the same time, he said softly, rather break than bend, unyielding and unforgiving, fearless. You don't need to hesitate or worry about any obstacles or resistance. Believe in the sword in your hand. With the sword in your hand, you can cut through all obstacles and go straight to the other side of the sword path. When these words reached Zhao Taimu's ears, Zhao Taimu was suddenly stunned and froze like a statue, not moving at all. These words had always been Chu Mu's thoughts. They were the portrayal of him as the youngest swordsmanship master on earth. They were also the unwillingness and obsession in the depths of Chu Mu's soul on the ancient sword continent. In the end, they transformed into Chu Mu's understanding of swordsmanship, and the first glimpse of the sword path. If it weren't for Zhao Taimu's protection several times, Chu Mu wouldn't have said these words to him. While saying these words, Chu Mu became more determined. His steps became steadier and his body straightened. Vaguely, there seemed to be a kind of momentum that belonged to the sword. A sharp momentum that would never look back and break all obstacles to go straight to the other side was condensing and taking shape. Chu Mu is doomed this time. Yes, senior brother Wang Feng is at stage 8 of the Sword Qi realm. His thunderbolt swordsmanship is famous in the inner sect. Why don't I see any fear in Chu Mu? Instead, I feel that he is very determined and even a little expectant. No matter what, he is doomed this time. Let's go and watch the show. Walking to the entrance of the cafeteria, Wang Feng stepped out without hesitation. It was as if he was walking on a bright path, a path that would lead him to the other side of the sword Dao. With every step he took, his heart became more determined. He seemed to have comprehended something, but he was unable to grasp it. There was a strange feeling that made him feel as if the sword in his hand was resonating with him. A unique aura was brewing. Cocoon transformation. With just a glance, Chu Mu saw the person standing a few dozen meters away. He ignored everyone else, not only because the aura on this person's body was extremely dense, but also because there was no one else within a few dozen meters. Everyone was staying far away. This person was Wang Feng. He had a medium build, wore a cyan gown, and appeared to be around 18 or 19 years old. His eyebrows were thick, and his eyes were filled with fury. His body even contained a faint fluctuation of thunderous fury. As soon as Wang Feng returned to the Qinfeng sword sect, he knew what had happened to Wang Chang, Wang Yi, and Wang Lei. He did not need to ask for the reason. He only needed to know who did it. When he found out that it was only an outer disciple who had entered the Sword Qi realm for only a month, he was first stunned. Then, he was filled with anger and killing intent. He did not have time to rest and rushed to the outer disciple area, which he usually did not care about. Although he had other methods to toy with Chu Mu, he wanted to do it himself. Otherwise, his anger would not be quenched. However, when Wang Feng saw Chu Mu striding out of the cafeteria, not only did he notice that there was no fear on Chu Mu's face, but there was also no fear in his eyes. On the contrary, there seemed to be a great aura gathering around him. This aura actually made it difficult for him to breathe. Good, you do have some skills. No wonder you could sever the tendons in Wang Lei's hand. Wang Feng spoke again. His voice was like thunder, exploding in everyone's ears. Many of the outer disciples felt uncomfortable and their ears were buzzing. You only have yourself to blame. Walking towards Wang Feng, Yi Futian felt that the anger coming from Wang Feng was getting stronger and stronger, making it difficult for him to breathe. Yi Futian resisted Wang Feng's pressure and walked forward step by step, closing the distance between him and Wang Feng. Good, you do have guts. However, do you know that an inner disciple who kills an outer disciple will only receive a light punishment? Wang Feng's face was ferocious, and there was a hint of darkness in his eyes. When he went out to train, his favorite thing to do was to enrage the ferocious beasts and leave them with wounds that were not fatal. He would make the ferocious beasts feel anger and despair before finally killing them. You want to kill me? Let's see if you have the ability. Chu Mu said. The pressure was getting stronger and stronger. His aura was like an invisible gale blowing towards Yi Futian. When Yi Futian was 8 meters away from Wang Feng, he stopped. This distance was already the limit. If he got any closer, it would cause his sword to slow down. You do have guts. Don't worry, I won't kill you immediately. I will leave 32 wounds on your body first, letting you experience the pain that Wang Lei and Wang Yi had to endure. Then, I will break the tendons in your arms and legs, letting you experience the pain and suffering that Wang Lei had to endure. Finally, I will stab my sword into your heart and kill you. Wang Feng's face was even more ferocious, like a demon. His eyes revealed an incomparably ferocious light. Using such a gloomy and bloodthirsty tone to say those words made the people who heard it subconsciously shrink their necks and involuntarily take 2 steps back. Chu Mu was not afraid at all. He pulled out his steel sword and pointed it at the ground with his right hand. His gaze was as sharp as a sword as he stared at Wang Feng. Every muscle in Yi Futian's body was twitching. The sword qi in his dantian was fully activated. He was preparing for the killing breeze. Some of the mysteries of wind that he had comprehended completely appeared in his mind. The air around him moved rhythmically like a gentle breeze. This was the first time in the ancient sword continent that he was fully focused on something. He believed that this sword attack would surpass his limit. His aura seemed to be gathering at a faster speed under this kind of stimulation. Wang Feng's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly had a feeling that the world around him had disappeared, swallowed by darkness. Only the person in front of him was constantly enlarging in his eyes. His figure, his aura, and his posture all made Wang Feng feel threatened. Wang Feng had no choice but to take this seriously. He pulled out his sword and threw the scabbard to the side. The long sword flashed in front of his chest, and sword qi surged out. Streaks of hair-like white qi spread to the body of the sword. They flowed and emitted a terrifyingly sharp aura that made people feel suffocated. The surrounding outer disciples were all shocked. They all held their breath. Their eyes were wide open, and they did not even blink. They were afraid that they would miss this exciting life and death battle. Chapter 11. Wind stopped. In Chu Mu's eyes there was only Wang Feng. It was as if the entire world was swallowed by darkness. Everything disappeared, leaving only him and Wang Feng facing each other. Both of them were accumulating their strength. The next sword strike would decide victory and defeat, life and death. The 4th level of the sword qi realm, and the 8th level of the sword qi realm. It was originally an insurmountable chasm, but in this instant, it made people forget about their cultivation. The people around them had already forgotten to breathe, to blink, and to think. In their eyes there were 2 swords that emitted different auras, facing each other. In the next second it would be a fatal blow. Suddenly, an unexpected aura appeared. It was as if a gust of wind had blown in from the heavens. It descended arrogantly and tore apart the sky. The darkness retreated, startling Chu Mu and Wang Feng. Its senior brother Shao Qianfeng is here. Oh right, today seems to be the day of his bet with Chu Mu. When Shao Qianfeng's aura entered, Chu Mu and Wang Feng's confrontation was disturbed. Under the influence of their auras, they both scattered. Shao Qianfeng, what is the meaning of this? Wang Feng looked at Shao Qianfeng and asked in a deep voice. You can go back now. Shao Qianfeng glanced at Wang Feng. His gaze was as sharp as a sword as he said coldly. Shao Qianfeng, although we are not in the same courtyard, we are both inner court disciples. Could it be that you still want to protect this outer court disciple? You don't mind being my enemy? Wang Feng's expression was stern. You are not worthy of being my enemy. Shao Qianfeng's tone was neither fast nor slow. He stood side by side with Chu Mu. When he looked at Wang Feng almost vomited blood. His face was ashen as he glared at Shao Qianfeng, but he couldn't say a word. This was because Wang Feng had fought with Shao Qianfeng before. Indeed, he wasn't Shao Qianfeng's opponent. Until now, Shao Qianfeng's sword was still fresh in his memory. Fine, Shao Qianfeng. You want to protect this outer court disciple, right? Fine, I hope you have the ability to protect him forever. Wang Feng fiercely nodded. He felt sullen and angry in his heart. He dispersed the sword aura and fiercely sheathed his sword. Then, he glared at Chu Mu menacingly. Then, he snorted angrily, turned around, and strode away. After Wang Feng left, Chu Mu slowly exhaled, and his tense muscles relaxed. Many thanks, Senior Brother Xiao. He turned to Xiao Qianfeng and cupped his hands in salute. It's nothing, Xiao Qianfeng said indifferently. His eyes contained a trace of fanaticism, and his cold tone also carried a trace of passion. Looking at your aura just now, could it be that you've mastered the killing breeze technique? As he spoke, Xiao Qianfeng looked at Chu Mu with eyes filled with anticipation. He really hoped that Chu Mu would give an affirmative answer. Once again, he was amazed by Xiao Qianfeng's breadth of mind. This kind of person only cared about the sword, pursued the pinnacle of sword techniques, and even the pinnacle of sword Dao. Senior Brother Xiao, you've also mastered the killing breeze technique, right? A trace of a smile hung on the corner of Xiao Qianfeng's mouth as he slowly said. The words Senior Brother Xiao came from the bottom of his heart. I used 13 days to master the killing breeze technique. What about you? The fanaticism in Xiao Qianfeng's eyes became even more obvious. 13 days. Chu Mu replied. He was referring to Deshang. All right, since we've both mastered the killing breeze technique within 13 days, then it's my loss, Xiao Qianfeng said. His words shocked Chu Mu, and also shocked the surrounding outer court disciples. Did you hear that? Chu Mu and Senior Brother Xiao have both mastered the sword technique of the breeze technique. This is too inconceivable. Yeah, the sword technique of the breeze technique, which was said to have remained unmastered for decades, has actually been mastered by someone else. If Senior Brother Xiao is a sword maniac, then it's still acceptable. But Chu Mu, an outer court disciple, actually mastered the sword technique of the breeze technique. Could it be that Chu Mu is the same as Senior Brother Xiao? Is he really a sword genius? Since they've both mastered the killing breeze technique, why did Senior Brother Xiao say that he lost? 3 years ago, I, Deshang of the Soaring Cloud sword technique, chose the sword technique of the breeze technique. I only managed to master the sword technique of the breeze technique. During these 3 years, I didn't stop cultivating the sword technique of the breeze technique. After I obtained the dazzling breeze technique, I started cultivating it a few days earlier than you. Theoretically speaking, I should have mastered the killing breeze technique earlier than you. But in reality, I used the same amount of time. This time, I'm not as good as you, Xiao Qianfeng said slowly. However, the fact that he said this time was very obvious. His loss was only temporary. This time, you've won. You can contribute the complete sword technique of the breeze technique to the sword faction. An intermediate sword technique can earn you quite a lot of contribution points. It should be very useful to you, Xiao Qianfeng said indifferently. I'm looking forward to you reaching the 8th level of the Sword Qi realm as soon as possible. Then, you'll be able to fight me with your full strength. That day won't be too far away, Chu Mu said. His battle intent also spread out. All right, Xiao Qianfeng said in a low voice. The fanaticism in his eyes became even more intense. He couldn't hide his excitement as he turned around and left with large strides. Looking at Xiao Qianfeng's back, Chu Mu's gaze became even sharper. He walked towards the sword pavilion with large strides. Dazzling breeze. Could it be one of the killing moves of the sword technique of the breeze technique? It should be. It's precisely because the dazzling breeze technique is missing that no one has mastered the sword technique of the breeze technique. However, Senior Brother Xiao unexpectedly obtained the dazzling breeze technique and completed the sword technique of the breeze technique. That's why he and Chu Mu were able to master it. A smarter disciple guessed. That's great. I'm about to master the Soaring Cloud sword technique. At that time, I'll be able to choose the sword technique of the breeze technique. In your dreams, didn't you hear what Senior Brother Xiao said? The complete sword technique of the breeze technique is an intermediate sword technique. At that time, unless you have enough contribution to the sword faction, you won't be able to choose it. There's really a flaw in the sword technique of the breeze technique. The sword pavilion's elder looked at the white paper that Chu Mu handed to him and his body trembled. A terrifying aura surged from his body, causing Chu Mu's vision to darken. It felt as if his body was being torn apart. He couldn't bear it and retreated with a pale face. Yes, the complete sword technique of the breeze technique should be an intermediate sword technique. Lin Yun took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. At the same time, he was guessing what level the Elder's cultivation had reached. Just a trace of the Elder's aura was enough to make him feel as if he was being torn apart. Compared to Wang Feng, it was like comparing heaven and earth. Middle-tier sword art. The Elder closed his eyes, seemingly in deep contemplation. After a while, he opened his eyes once more. That's right, the complete breeze swordsmanship is indeed a middle-tier sword art. Have you made up your mind to contribute the dazzling breeze swordsmanship to the sword faction? Yes. Very good. Using the dazzling breeze technique to upgrade the sword technique of the breeze technique from a low-level sword technique to an intermediate-level sword technique. Then, I'll count it as your contribution. The Elder looked at Chu Mu with admiration and said with a smile, contributing a low-level sword technique will earn you 10 contribution points. For an intermediate-level sword technique, you can earn 100 contribution points, or you can choose to learn an intermediate-level sword technique. What do you choose? I want the contribution points. Take out your disciple sword token. Lin Yun took out his disciple sword token. It was gray in color and symbolized that he was an outer disciple. It was a finger long and wide and looked like a small sword. There were 2 ancient characters engraved on it. The Elder took the disciple sword token and walked into the inner room. After a while, he came out and handed the disciple sword token back to Chu Mu. Now that you have 100 contribution points, you can go to the Internal Affairs Hall and exchange them for some medicinal pellets to increase your cultivation speed. Remember, when the time comes, you can tell them my name. Thank you, Elder. Lin Yun put away the disciple sword token. I'm very curious. The dazzling breeze technique should have been obtained by Xiao Qianfeng. He didn't come to contribute, but instead, he asked you to contribute. The Elder's eyes flashed with curiosity. Elder, this is an agreement between me and Senior Brother Xiao. I can't talk about it in detail. Please forgive me. Chu Mu almost broke out in cold sweat as he said simply. Is that so? Next time, I'll ask Xiao Qianfeng. The Elder looked at Chu Mu suspiciously, but didn't pursue the matter. This made Chu Mu let out a sigh of relief. Oh right, the breeze sword technique is an intermediate-level sword technique. With your current cultivation, it will be very difficult for you to learn it. You can choose to learn another low-level sword technique. When Chu Mu heard this, he immediately agreed. How could he let go of such an opportunity? He immediately entered the first floor of the sword pavilion and started to choose. The soft cloud sword technique was a low-level sword technique focused on defense. As for offense, he already had the flying cloud sword technique and the breeze sword technique. Immediately after, Chu Mu found a low-level movement technique. He quickly flipped through it and memorized it. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Chu Mu completely memorized the low-level movement technique. Chapter 12. The Internal Affairs Hall was located between the outer disciple area and the inner disciple area. It would take about an hour to walk from the Sword Pavilion to the Internal Affairs Hall. The Internal Affairs Hall wasn't something that the Chore Hall could compare to. It occupied 5 times the area of the Chore Hall. Inside, there was a hall master and 4 deacons. The hall master was in charge while the 4 deacons were in charge of different affairs. Chu Mu's arrival surprised the deacon who received him. It was not only because of his identity as an outer disciple. Although there were very few outer disciples who came to the Internal Affairs Hall, there were still some occasionally. The most important thing was that his cultivation was only at the 4th stage of the Sword Qi realm. After the deacon asked about Chu Mu's purpose for coming, he changed his mind and planned to take advantage of him. However, He felt that it was a bit inconceivable that someone at the 4th stage of the Sword Chi realm would have enough contribution points to exchange for elixirs, so he quietly probed. Although Chu Mu was a bit of a sword fanatic, he was not stupid. He immediately understood the deacon's thoughts and casually mentioned the Sword Pavilion Elder. As expected, the deacon misunderstood and thought that Chu Mu was being taken care of by the Sword Pavilion Elder. Therefore, he dispelled the idea of taking advantage of Chu Mu and became more enthusiastic. He didn't look down on Chu Mu because his cultivation was far inferior to his. The elixirs that can be exchanged for in the Sword Pavilion are low grade. What kind of elixirs do you want to exchange for? Deacon Wen asked with a smile. Is it for healing, increasing cultivation, or something else? Increasing cultivation. He didn't know much about elixirs. Elixirs that can increase cultivation include Qi Nourishing Pill, Qi Gathering Pill, Qi Refining Pill, and Qi Breaking Pill. Do you know the difference between them? Then listen to me in detail. Deacon Wen said with a smile. Qi Nourishing Pill is the lowest grade of elixirs. It is suitable for people at the 1st to 3rd stages of the Sword Qi realm to nourish their Sword Qi. Qi Gathering Pill is suitable for people at the 4th to 6th stages. Qi Refining Pill is suitable for swordsmen at the 7th and 8th stages, and Qi Breaking Pill is suitable for swordsmen at the 9th stages. Since you are at the 4th stage of the Sword Qi realm, I suggest that you exchange for Qi Gathering Pill. Each pill is worth 20 contribution points. Generally, you need 5 or 6 Qi Gathering Pills to break through from Stage 4 to Stage 5. If you want to break through to Stage 6, you need even more. Deacon Wen added. After thinking for a moment, Chu Mu said, I have 100 contribution points. I'll exchange them for 5 Qi Gathering Pills. 100 contribution points. Deacon Wen's mouth was wide open. He originally thought that it would be very good if Chu Mu could have 20 or 30 contribution points. He didn't expect it to be 100 contribution points, but when he thought of the Sword Arts Elder, he couldn't help feeling envious. Perhaps the 100 contribution points were given to him by the Sword Firmament Pavilion's elders. Junior brother, wait a moment. Deacon Wen took Chu Mu's disciple's sword medallion and walked into the room. Before long, he returned with a small porcelain bottle in his hand. He handed it to Chu Mu along with the disciple's sword medallion. There are 5 Qi amassing pills in this bottle. The 100 merit points in the disciple's sword medallion have all been deducted. I wish you great progress in your cultivation, junior apprentice brother. When the time comes, don't forget me. Thank you, senior brother. Chu Mu put away the sword medallion and shook the porcelain bottle. Ding ding dong dong sounds could be heard. Chu Mu immediately knew the number of pills in the bottle. 5 pills. This junior apprentice brother must be very talented to be taken care of by the Sword Arts Elder. Deacon Wen looked at Chu Mu's back and thought to himself, if he knew that Chu Mu's cultivation talent was only at the 9th grade, his jaw would probably drop. I wonder how effective the Qi Gathering Pills are? I'll know tomorrow. Chu Mu took the porcelain bottle and left the Internal Affairs Hall. He strode towards the northern district of the outer sect. When he returned to the northern district, he became the center of attention again. Many outer sect disciples looked at him with envy, admiration, and dissatisfaction. Senior brother Chu Mu, please teach me swordsmanship. A disciple at the 4th stage of the Sword Qi realm suddenly rushed in front of Chu Mu and pleaded. Senior brother Chu, please teach me swordsmanship. Senior brother Chu, please accept me. I'm willing to be at your beck and call. The actions of some of the outer sect disciples made Chu Mu speechless. After rejecting them, he returned to his wooden hut and closed the wooden door. Although he didn't cultivate, he organized the various comprehensions from his recent cultivation and the strange state that appeared when he faced off with Wang Feng today. But now, he couldn't enter that state no matter what. Could it be that I need enough external pressure? Chu Mu couldn't help but think. Soon, the sun set in the west. After enjoying a delicious meal in the canteen, he immediately returned to his wooden hut. The night passed. At dawn, Chu-Mu left his wooden hut and went to the cliff to face the morning sun. He sat down cross-legged and placed the steel sword on his legs. He took out the porcelain bottle and opened it. A wisp of medicinal fragrance floated out. He poured out a chi-gathering pill. It was light yellow and the size of a soybean. It emitted a faint medicinal fragrance. He threw it into his mouth. It melted in his mouth, leaving only a faint medicinal fragrance lingering in his mouth. The chi-gathering pill had already turned into a warm current that flowed down his throat. He immediately began cultivating according to the chants of the fourth layer of the essence nurturing sword chi art. A wisp of sword chi was transferred from his dantian. The chi-gathering pill turned into a warm current that entered his body and spread out in all directions. Wherever the sword chi passed, the warm current would be absorbed and circulated along with the sword chi. In the process of circulation, the warm current would be assimilated into sword chi. After 2 small circulations, the warm current from the chi-gathering pill was completely assimilated into sword chi. It flowed back into his dantian, and the sword chi in his dantian grew a bit stronger. Mid-4th phase. Good, I've finally broken through to the mid-4th phase. I'll continue to work hard and try to break through to the 5th phase today. Chu-Mu revealed a trace of joy. He quickly took out 2 more chi-gathering pills and threw them into his mouth. The warm current became even stronger. He continued to cultivate. Not long after, the warm current from the 2 chi-gathering pills was completely absorbed and assimilated into sword chi. The sword chi grew a bit stronger. Late 4th phase. He poured out another 2 chi-gathering pills and threw them into his mouth. He continued to cultivate. 10 minor circulations were finally completed. Today's sword chi cultivation was also over. He had consumed a total of 5 energy-gathering pills, and the effects were obvious. The sword chi in his dantian had grown significantly stronger. He was now at the early stage of the 5th stage of the sword chi realm. The sword chi of the 5th phase sword chi is 2 parts purer than the 4th phase sword chi. The total amount has increased by around 50%. Chu-Mu thought to himself. He leaped up and pulled out his sword. He began to practice the basic sword technique. Now he practiced the soaring cloud sword technique. Now he practiced the clear wind sword technique. When I used the clear wind kill at the 4th phase, I used up all my sword chi. Now that I'm using the clear wind kill, its power has increased slightly. Moreover, the remaining sword chi is enough to use the clear wind brush and dazzling wind again. Obviously, the difference between the 4th and 5th phase sword chi was very obvious. After his sword chi recovered, he began to practice the soft cloud sword technique. The soft cloud sword technique only had 5 forms. The first 4 forms were nameless. The 5th form was called soft cloud 3 revolutions. After using it, there would be a soft cloud that would revolve 3 times. As long as the attack was absorbed by the cloud, it would be weakened by the continuous 3 revolutions. However, it could dissolve all the low-level attacks and 30% of mid-level attack. In addition, the low-level body movement that he had memorized was called swinging willow body movement. It focused on being light and flexible, like a willow branch swinging in the wind. It only took him 1 day to master it. He continued to practice on the 2nd day. However, because he had used up all his chi-gathering pills, his sword chi did not increase much. It only stabilized at the early stage of the 5th phase. As for the soft cloud sword technique and swinging willow body movement, it was Deshang's. I can completely absorb 1 chi-gathering pill every 2 small circulations. 10 small circulations are exactly 5 chi-gathering pills. That's how I broke through to my current level. I wonder how efficient the other disciples are at absorbing. Under normal circumstances, if one could only circulate 4 small circulations a day, then it would take 3 days to absorb 5 chi-gathering pills. However, 1 mid-level sword technique is worth 100 contribution points, and one low-level sword technique is worth 10 contribution points. One chi gathering pill is worth 20 contribution points, which is equivalent to the contribution points of 2 low-level sword technique. The value of these chi gathering pills is really high. Ordinary people would not be able to get their hands on them. As Chu Mu faced the sea of clouds, he thought to himself, the effect of elixirs is really amazing. I believe that if I have enough contribution points to exchange for enough elixirs, I will definitely be able to break through to the 7th stage of the Sword Chi realm in a short period of time. Now I am at the early stage of the 5th stage of the Sword Chi realm. Flying Cloud Sword Technique, Soft Cloud Sword Technique, Breeze Sword Technique, Deshang Body Movement, Chaotic Steps, and Swinging Willow Body Movement. However, it will be difficult to improve them in a short period of time. He stood up and said to himself, sword techniques are killing technique. It's time to go out and experience life and death. Only then can I see the deeper secrets of sword technique. Chapter 13. He enjoyed a delicious meal in the cafeteria and prepared 10 days' worth of dry food and jerky. He also brought the water bottle and the 3-chipped steel sword as backup. Chu Mu held the other steel sword in his left hand and left the wooden house. Under the curious and admiring gazes of the outer disciples, he was ready to go to the chore hall to register his information. However, he had only taken a few steps when he felt 2 sharp auras that were like unsheathed swords. The outer disciples couldn't help but tremble. They felt cold all over and their skin hurt. A young man and a young woman in green robes strode over. They carried long swords on their backs and looked cold. There was a trace of arrogance between their brows. "Where is Chu Mu?" The female disciple raised her chin and said in a cold and arrogant voice. She didn't ask anyone, but her eyes swept over and fell on Chu Mu's face with a trace of coercion. "Why are you two looking for me?" Chu Mu said calmly. He was puzzled. What was going on recently? Why were inner disciples looking for him so often? "You are Chu Mu." The male disciple's eyes lit up. Like 2 sword light, they shot out and fell on Chu Mu's face. Chu Mu didn't move at all. "You have some skills. We are disciples of the Law Enforcement Hall. We are looking for you to investigate something. Now, follow us to the Law Enforcement Hall to see the Law Enforcement Elder." As he spoke, the male disciple waved his sleeve gently. There was a pattern of 2 silver swords embroidered on his sleeve. After thinking for a while, he felt that this matter might have something to do with Wang Lei. "Senior brother and senior sister, please lead the way." "Humph." The female law enforcement disciple snorted. She was very dissatisfied with Chu Mu's attitude. The law enforcement disciples were at least at stage 8 of the Sword Chi realm. Moreover, their status was slightly above the ordinary inner disciples. Chu Mu was just an outer disciple. It was fine that he didn't fawn on them when he saw them, but his expression was calm. It was obvious that he didn't take them seriously. "Let's go." The male disciple smiled and turned to leave. Chu Mu followed. "This is bad. Chu Mu will definitely be punished after being taken away by the Law Enforcement Hall. I'm guessing that it must have something to do with W&G Lei. After all, severing the tendons in the hand is no small matter. According to my guess, it's definitely related to senior brother Wang Feng." That day, Wang Feng wanted to kill Chu Mu but was stopped by senior brother Xiao Qianfeng. However, Wang Feng harbored hatred towards Chu Mu and wanted to use other methods to deal with Chu Mu. Perhaps this time, it was senior brother Wang Feng who reported it to the Law Enforcement Hall. "But I heard that our sword faction's Law Enforcement Hall is very fair." "Fairness depends on who you're talking to." The speed of the female law enforcement disciple was very fast, as if she wanted to embarrass Chu Mu on purpose. The male law enforcement disciple seemed to know what she was thinking. He just smiled bitterly and slowed down a little, in case Chu Mu couldn't keep up. Chu Mu didn't say a word. He adjusted his breathing and quickly walked forward. His steps seemed to be messy, but the frequency was very high and his speed was very fast. He was using the chaotic steps to rush forward. He didn't fall into a disadvantageous position. This made the male law enforcement disciple a little surprised. Junior Brother Chu, when we reach the law enforcement hall, I will answer whatever the law enforcement elder asks. The law enforcement elder will naturally make a fair judgment. The male law enforcement disciple suddenly said. Thank you for your reminder. Chu Mu was slightly taken aback when he heard this. The female law enforcement disciple snorted again, as if to express her dissatisfaction. The law enforcement hall was already far away from the outer court disciple area. It was on the left and right side of the Qinfeng Hall with the inner court disciple area. Outside the law enforcement hall was a gravel road. The red door was open, and there was a sword pattern on the left and right. When the door was closed, it was a pattern of two swords crossing each other. After entering, there was a courtyard of a few hundred meters. It was paved with square bluestones. There was also a hall in the courtyard. On the left and right sides of the hall's door, there were two statues that were as tall as a person. They were holding two swords crossing each other. There were 3 bright red words written on the plaque above the door. The words were written in bold strokes and contained a trace of sharpness and sternness. Law Enforcement Hall. Chu Mu followed the 2 law enforcement disciples into the law enforcement hall. The entire law enforcement hall was arranged a bit like a government office. There was a huge and heavy screen. On the screen, there was a plaque. On the plaque, there was an imposing blood-red word, fairness. Under the plaque, there was a chair and a big table. On the chair, there was a man who looked to be in his 60s. His face was solemn. His nose was wide and his mouth was square. His eyes were closed. He sat upright with his hands on the table. He was wearing a long black robe. There was a majestic aura around him. At first glance, he looked like a mountain that had been standing since ancient times. Chu Mu's gaze first fell on the old man's body. He only felt a suffocating aura that was as heavy as a mountain crushing down on him. This caused Chu Mu's heart to be alarmed, and he secretly guessed the old man's cultivation. Elder, outer court disciple Chu Mu is here. The male law enforcement disciple's expression was solemn. There was unconcealable respect and worship in his eyes. He cupped his hands and said in a deep voice. In an instant, the old man's eyes slowly opened. A pair of clear black and white eyes seemed to see through all illusions. Ignoring the distance, they fell on Chu Mu's face. A wave of righteous aura blew over like a fierce wind. If it was a timid person or someone with a guilty conscience, under such a pair of righteous eyes, they would definitely retreat in panic or even go limp. However, Chu Mu was neither timid nor guilty. His expression didn't change, and he didn't take a step back. Outer court disciple Chu Mu, you seriously injured outer court disciple Wang Chang, Wang Yi, and severed outer court disciple Wang Lei's tendons. Do you admit to this? The law enforcement elder spoke. His tone was full of vigor. His voice was like the ringing of a large bell. It was majestic and full of righteousness. Every word drilled into Chu Mu's ears. If it was someone with a weak mind, they would definitely panic. Disciple admits. Chu Mu cupped his hands and replied indifferently, Disciple admits it. Tell me your reason? The law enforcement elder asked again. The Wang families, Wang Lin and I. Chu Mu was neither fast nor slow. His tone was calm as he explained the beginning of the matter in a simple yet important manner. Discipline elder, when this disciple took action, it was because he was passive. This disciple didn't take the initiative to cause trouble. Do you have witnesses? The law enforcement elder's tone was still righteous. The Chor Hall's Deacon Yan Quan and inner court disciple senior brother Xiao Qianfeng both saw it with their own eyes. Many outer court disciples also know that Wang Lei took the initiative to cause trouble. Chu Mu was neither servile nor overbearing. Lu Shui summoned Wang Feng, Yan Quan, and Xiao Qianfeng to the law enforcement hall. The law enforcement elder instructed, Yan Ling, go to the outer court disciples area to investigate this matter. Yes, Elder. The male and female law enforcement disciples immediately turned and left, leaving Chu Mu to face the law enforcement elder. The law enforcement elder closed his eyes again and did not say a word. The atmosphere in the law enforcement hall was very oppressive. Chu Mu stood motionless. His thoughts were clear and unaffected. It seems that this matter is related to Wang Feng. Chu Mu thought to himself, however, this law enforcement elder is full of righteousness. He should be worthy of the word, just. After a period of time, Lu Shui returned with 3 other people, Wang Feng, Xiao Qianfeng, and Yan Quan. Wang Feng's gaze paused on Chu Mu's face for a moment. His eyes were filled with deep hatred. Xiao Qianfeng only faintly nodded his head while Yan Quan smiled at Chu Mu. Greetings to the law enforcement elder. The 3 of them simultaneously bowed to the law enforcement elder. Xiao Qianfeng, Yan Quan, are you 2 willing to testify for outer court disciple Chu Mu? The law enforcement elder asked first. We are willing. Xiao Qianfeng and Yan Quan did not think too much, which made Chu Mu feel a little touched. Did you see the conflict between outer court disciple Chu Mu and Wang Chang, Wang Yi and Wang Lei with your own eyes? If you saw it with your own eyes, tell me in detail. The law enforcement elder said. Xiao Qianfeng did not speak much, only explaining with a few sentences. On the other hand, Yan Quan spoke more, but his words were vivid, as if the scene of that day was replayed. The veins on Wang Feng's forehead bulged and throbbed. Not only did he hate Chu Mu, but he also hated Xiao Qianfeng and Yan Quan. At this time, Yan Ling rushed back and strode in. Reporting to Elder, after investigating, the truth is the same as what outer court disciple Chu Mu said. Yan Ling said, since the truth has come to light, I will make a judgment. The law enforcement elder's gaze swept over Wang Feng and Chu Mu. Outer court disciple Wang Lei committed many evil deeds. Outer court disciple Wang Chang and Wang Yi bullied others. They were injured and crippled. They only have themselves to blame. From now on, the 3 of them are expelled from the sect. Inner court disciple Wang Feng. Wang Feng's heart was filled with hatred, but when he saw the law enforcement elder's gaze land on him, he hurriedly lowered his head and cupped his hands. Disciple is here. As Wang Lei's elder brother and an inner court disciple, you did not discipline him strictly and did not set an example. This elder punishes you to Fierce Wind Cliff to reflect on your mistakes for 3 days. Do you accept? The law enforcement elder said. Disciple will accept. Wang Feng gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. The veins on his arm, which was covered by his sleeves, bulged. Outer court disciple Chu Mu was too heavy-handed, but since you were protecting yourself, I will not punish you this time. However, you must remember, do not bully others and bully the weak. Otherwise, if this elder knows, the light punishment will be Fierce Wind Cliff to reflect on your mistakes, and the heavy punishment will be expulsion from the sect. Do you remember? The law enforcement elder said. Disciple will remember. Chu Mu said. All right, the judgment is over. You can leave now. The law enforcement elder ordered them to leave. Everyone bowed again and left the law enforcement hall. Chapter 14. Chu Mu. Wang Feng clenched his teeth so hard that they almost shattered. Wang Lei, Wang Chang, and Wang Yi were expelled from the sword faction. This was expected, so Wang Feng didn't feel sad. After all, Wang Chang and Wang Yi were only lackeys and weren't valued by him. As for Wang Lei, his tendons were broken. Unless he had some heavenly treasure, he wouldn't be able to practice the sword in the future. Staying in the sword faction would only be ridiculed, so it was better to leave. It was precisely because Wang Feng understood this point that he brought this matter to the law enforcement hall. His goal was only to have Chu Mu receive a bit of punishment. Otherwise, the resentment in his heart would be stifled and unable to be released, making him feel abnormally uncomfortable. He didn't expect that in the end, The law enforcement elder's sentence was to go to Fierce Wind Cliff to reflect on his mistakes for 3 days, while Chu Mu only received a warning and no punishment. This was completely different from what Wang Feng had expected. Wang Feng immediately felt sullen. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood, but he had no choice but to forcefully suppress it. Chu Mu, I hope you can quickly raise your cultivation to the 7th stage of the Sword Qi realm and enter the inner court. When that time comes, it will be your death. Wang Feng's eyes were filled with hatred as he roared at Chu Mu with a ruthless tone. He forcefully resisted the urge to kill Chu Mu right now and turned around to leave. At the same time, he swept a glance at Xiao Qianfeng and Yan Quan with a strong sense of hostility. Thank you, senior brothers. Chu Mu ignored Wang Feng's threats and cupped his hands towards Xiao Qianfeng and Yan Quan with a smile. It's nothing. This time, Wang Feng will definitely hate you even more after the law enforcement hall failed to punish you. Xiao Qianfeng said, however, as long as you are strong, all schemes are useless. Junior brother Chu, let me give you a suggestion. Unless you have enough confidence to deal with Wang Feng, don't easily become an inner court disciple. Yan Quan said with a serious expression, an inner court disciple will receive some punishment if he kills an outer court disciple. Now that this matter has reached the law enforcement hall, once Wang Feng kills you, it won't be just a light punishment. Therefore, he doesn't dare to make a move. However, once you become an inner court disciple, Wang Feng can challenge you to a life and death battle. At that time, he can justifiably kill you. Thank you for telling me, senior brother. Chu Mu cupped his hands and said, I'm in the Soaring Wind courtyard. Wang Feng is in the Rumbling Thunder courtyard, Xiao Qianfeng suddenly said. When Chu Mu heard that, he instantly understood that the inner disciples were separated into different courtyards. Xiao Qianfeng and Wang Feng belonged to different courtyards. Junior brother, looking at your appearance, are you planning to go out? Yan Quan's gaze swept over the bundle on Chu Mu's shoulder and the water bottle on his waist, and said with a smile, Senior brother has good eyes. I was just about to go to the chore hall to register with senior brother, Chu Mu said. If you want to go out and train, I suggest you go to the 100 Beast Valley, Xiao Qianfeng said. Senior brother Xiao is right. I also suggest going to the 100 Beast Valley. Yan Quan smiled and said, the 100 Beasts Valley is located at the foot of Mount Qinglan. It's the first choice for the disciples of our sword sect to gain experience. There are all kinds of fierce beasts in the 100 Beasts Valley, and if you're lucky, you can find some elixirs to increase your cultivation. This is for you. I hope it will help you a little. As he spoke, Yan Quan took out a thin booklet from his chest. On it was written, Qingfeng Sword Sect's Illustrated Handbook of 100 Herbs. Xiao Qianfeng also took out a thin booklet from his chest. On it was written, Qingfeng Sword Sect's Illustrated Handbook of 100 Beasts. Chu Mu didn't refuse. He took it and put it away. Thank you, senior brothers. This time, I'm also going out to train, but not to the 100 Beast Valley. I hope that when I come back, you'll have enough cultivation to fight with me. Xiao Qianfeng looked straight at Chu Mu. His tone was as sharp as a sword and contained a hint of fanaticism, which surprised Yan Quan. I'm also looking forward to it. Chu Mu didn't back down. Facing Xiao Qianfeng's sharp eyes, the corners of his mouth lifted into a smile. Xiao Qianfeng nodded slightly and turned to leave. Junior brother, there's one thing you have to remember. On Qinglan Mountain, there's also Qinglan Sword Sect and Qingshui Sword Sect. Their disciples' first choice for training is also the 100 Beast Valley. Yan Quan suddenly remembered something and said, Qingshui Sword Sect's overall strength is similar to Qingfeng Sword Sect's, and Qinglan Sword Sect's overall strength is the strongest of the 3 sections. Moreover, they consider themselves to be the orthodox sect of Qinglan Mountain and are quite hostile to both Qingfeng Sword Sect and Qingshui Sword Sect. If you meet a disciple of Qinglan Sword Sect, remember to stay away. In addition, There are often some loose swordsmen who enter the 100-Beast Valley to make a living. Some of them are afraid of our reputation, but there are also some vicious and cunning people among them. Junior brother, you must be careful. Thank you for telling me. Chumu is very grateful. Haha, I have high hopes for you. I'm waiting for you to repay me. Yan Quan laughed. Qinglan Mountain was nearly 2,000 meters above sea level, and its surface area was even larger. Qingfeng Sword Sect was located in a corner of the mountain. A gray figure walked as if he was flying, nimble and unrestrained, shuttling through the vegetation and rocks without any hindrance from the dangerous terrain. After bidding farewell to Yan Quan, Chu Mu immediately went down the mountain and headed in the direction of the 100-Beast Valley. The 100-Beast Valley was located in the northwest direction of Qinglan Mountain. It was a valley with forests, rivers, cliffs, and so on. His cultivation had reached the 5th stage of the Sword Qi realm, and his chaotic steps and swaying willow movement technique were also Deshang's. It was not difficult for him to jump between the vegetation and rock. He also took out the 2 illustrated handbooks given by Xiao Qianfeng and Yan Quan and looked through them. With his superhuman memory, he roughly memorized the content. After more than 2 hours, he finally arrived at the entrance of the 100-Beast Valley. The entrance was covered with dark green vines that twined around it for a long time. Next to the entrance stood a stone tablet that was more than a meter tall. The stone tablet was mottled and rough, and it was crooked and entangled by the dark green vines. The words 100 Beast could be vaguely seen on it, but the words at the bottom were completely blocked. After looking at it for a while, he put away the illustrated handbooks and strode toward the entrance of the 100-Beast Valley. The entrance to the 100-Beast Valley was flat and bare. Clearly, it had been trampled out. There were also some footprints that were relatively new, indicating that some people had entered the 100-Beast Valley not long ago. However, according to Yan Quan, there were a total of 3 entrances to the 100-Beast Valley, and this one faced the Qingfeng Sword Sect. It was said that one could encounter ferocious beasts at any time in the 100-Beast Valley. Therefore, as soon as one entered the 100-Beast Valley, one had to be on high alert and pay attention to their surroundings. Occasionally, the roar of a beast could be heard from afar. I hope I can improve my cultivation again here. Chu Mu muttered to himself and quickly walked forward. Chapter 15. Inside the 100-Beast Valley, there was a forest that was either tall or short, thick or thin. According to the 100-Beast Illustrated Handbook, this is a ferocious fanged wolf, a low-level ferocious beast, but its strength is comparable to a 6th-level Sword Qi realm swordsman. Chu Mu pulled out his sword and faced a gray wolf that was the size of a wolfhound with a height of 5 meters. Ferocious beasts have a stronger physique than humans. Their claws and teeth are even sharper and harder, and can easily tear through flesh. In this aspect, ferocious beasts are stronger than human swordsmen. However, swordsmen have sharp swords as weapons and swordsmanship as a means of killing ferocious beasts. The ferocious fanged wolf's 4 limbs clawed the ground and its body crawled. Its sharp claws almost dug into the hard rock. Its eyes flashed with a ferocious light as it stared down at Chu Mu. Its 4 extremely protruding sharp white teeth crisscrossed, emitting a chilling aura that made people tremble. A low roar, like rolling thunder, came from the ferocious fanged wolf's slightly squirming throat. The ferocious fanged wolf's body slightly shrank, like a spring that had been compressed to the limit. With a whoosh, a gray shadow flew over with the advantage of diving. Its raised claws flashed with a sharp cold light, and the suffocating coldness made people's hearts palpitate. Chu Mu's pupils instantly contracted, and he took a step forward. His body suddenly became erratic, like a willow branch swaying in the wind. The ferocious fanged wolf growled, and its claws continuously clawed at the air. The cold and sharp claws intertwined into a net, enveloping Chu Mu's body. Your speed is faster than mine, but I can see the trajectory of your attack. You can't hit me at all, he said to himself. His footsteps were messy, and he quickly moved a short distance on the ground. His body swayed like a willow branch in the wind, and he unbelievably shuttled through the intertwining claws of the ferocious fanged wolf without even touching the corner of his clothes. He didn't use his sword, and just kept dodging the ferocious fanged wolf's claws because he was practicing his body movement and footwork. When he was in the sword faction, he was able to master the chaotic steps and whirling willow steps to the greater mastery in just a few days. Later on, he also started to use the whirling willow steps and chaotic steps at the same time. But that was only in the case of practice. Chumu, who was known as the youngest master swordsman, deeply understood that the results of practice were ultimately just practice. Deshang could only become the real Deshang if he used it in actual combat and used it to hone himself in a battle of life and death. Otherwise, everything would just be practice. So now, he was using the fierce-fanged wolf's speed and sharp claws to hone his footwork and body movements, so that he could better use them in actual combat and practice. In the beginning, his nerves were tense and he was incomparably vigilant. He was afraid that he would be scratched by the fierce-fanged wolf's sharp claws. If that happened, he would definitely be injured. Thus, his chaotic steps and swinging willow movement technique were a bit stiff. There were a few times when he almost made a mistake in his coordination. Then, he continuously dodged. His tense nerves gradually relaxed. His footwork and body movements became more and more natural. From the bottom of his heart, there was a kind of carefree feeling of floating clouds and flowing water. Awoo! The continuous attacks of its sharp claws were all dodged by the human in front of it. It didn't hit him even once. This made the fierce-fanged wolf furious. Its ferocious eyes turned red. It suddenly opened its mouth and bit. Its sharp protruding fangs were even more terrifying than its claws. Chumu was slightly surprised, but his movements didn't stop. His footwork was broken and messy, but his body swayed strangely like a willow branch. He could advance and retreat freely, moving with the wind and avoiding the fierce-fanged wolf's bite. Up to now, the footwork and body movements that this fierce-fanged wolf can give me have already reached the limit. Let's practice my swordsmanship. He raised his hand and drew his sword light. A bright and cold light pierced towards the fierce-fanged wolf as if it came from the sky. The fierce-fanged wolf was startled. It raised its claws and fiercely clawed at the fierce-fanged wolf. The sword light flickered and staggered, causing the fierce-fanged wolf's claw to miss. The fierce-fanged wolf continued to stab forward. The fierce-fanged wolf fiercely bit down. With the toughness and sharpness of its fangs, the great steel sword would most likely be damaged if it was bitten. With a flick of his wrist, the straight sword light flickered strangely again and staggered past the fierce-fanged wolf's fangs. The sword slashed across the fierce-fanged wolf's neck. An obscure feeling. This sword strike didn't kill the fierce-fanged wolf. It only slightly injured it. A few strands of gray hair flew off. A thin wound appeared on the fierce-fanged wolf's neck, with scarlet blood oozing out. The slight injury angered the fierce-fanged wolf even more. It became even more savage and bloodthirsty. Its eyes were covered with a layer of blood red. It growled and roared, emitting a terrifying and murderous aura. It madly pounced towards Yishiwen, as if it wanted to perish together with him. Chumu used chaotic steps and swinging willow wind to lightly dodge the fierce-fanged wolf's pounce. His eyebrows slightly furrowed. With the sharpness of the great steel sword, I can only barely cut open the fierce-fanged wolf's fur. If I want to kill it, I'll have to continuously hit the same wound. Although I can do it with my eyesight and sword skills, it'll take a little too long. It seems that I'll have to use some sword skills to kill it as soon as possible. The fierce-fanged wolf's sharp claws fiercely swept across. Like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves, it rolled up a lot of sand and dust, as if it wanted to cut Chumu in half. However, a strange scene appeared in front of the fierce-fanged wolf. As its sharp claws swept across, the human under its claws suddenly disappeared. A hint of doubt appeared in its scarlet eyes. Like a gust of wind, it appeared behind the fierce-fanged wolf again. The fierce-fanged wolf only felt a sharp murderous intent. A sense of danger made the gray hair on its back stand up. It hurriedly turned around and opened its mouth. Its fangs crisscrossed and bit towards the human. With a whoosh, cool breeze was used. A light green color appeared out of thin air, as if it was a cool breeze blowing from nothingness. The wind made the fierce-fanged wolf's gray hair flutter backwards. The wind made the fierce-fanged wolf's scarlet eyes almost tear up. The wind made the fierce-fanged wolf's throat dry and its stomach bloat. The wind made the fierce-fanged wolf roll its eyes when it smelled the stench coming from its mouth. The sharp murderous intent contained in the cool breeze made the fierce-fanged wolf extremely frightened. However, it was too fast. The sword had already stabbed out. The fierce murderous intent in the cool breeze moved forward in a straight line and pierced into the fierce-fanged wolf's wide-open mouth. It went straight through its throat and blood splattered everywhere. The fierce-fanged wolf only felt a thick and sweet blood gurgling out of its throat like spring water flowing into its stomach. With a squelch, the tip of the sword pierced through the fierce-fanged wolf's fur from the inside out. With a twist of his wrist, the blade of the sword twisted and blood splattered everywhere. The fierce-fanged wolf's body twitched and its scarlet eyes retreated. Its eyeballs fell out and turned white. It still wanted to use its claws to attack, but it fell to the ground and its limbs twitched. Pulling out the sword, Shao Chen shook off the blood on the sword and looked at the twitching fierce-fanged wolf. After fusing with the strange wind, the power of the cool breeze multiplied. That's why I was able to kill the fierce-fanged wolf in one strike. What exactly is this comprehension? Chu Mu was puzzled. Since the comprehension of the wind can increase the power of the cool breeze sword art, then can it increase the power of the basic sword arts? In the next battle, I won't use the cool breeze sword art. I will only use the basic sword arts and fuse the comprehension of the wind into battle. It seems that the 100 Beast Illustrated Handbook said that the 4 fangs of the fierce-fanged wolf can be brought back to the sword sect to exchange for contribution points. As Shao Chen spoke, he moved to take the 4 fangs. Chapter 16. Fierce Gale Cliff was a place where strong winds blew all year round. The wind was as sharp as a knife, forcefully blowing a cliff out of the mountain, hence the name Fierce Gale Cliff. Senior Brother Wang, I've heard that Chu Mu, that little bastard, went to the 100 Beast Valley to train. A young man with a hedgehog head delivered food to Wang Feng and said at the same time. The way he looked at Wang Feng was a little strange, like admiration. 100 Beast Valley training. Wang Feng stood up, his eyes flashing with hatred. He opened his mouth and laughed with his back facing the wind. There was too much ruthlessness in his laughter. Chu Mu, you damned bastard. In the sword faction, Shao Qianfeng protected you, and because of the law enforcement hall, I couldn't kill you. However, you actually went to the 100 Beast Valley to train. You're completely seeking your own death. Wu Chang, I'll have to ask you to help me with this matter, although I really want to personally chop off Chu Mu's head. Don't worry, Senior Brother Wang. I'll break the tendons of that little bastard's arms and legs, let him feel the taste of despair, and then chop off his head. The hedgehog head licked his lips and laughed sinisterly, then turned around and left in large strides. Chu Mu, little bastard of the Chu clan, the 100 Beast Valley will be your burial ground. After Wu Chang left, Wang Feng turned around and faced the wind. His black hair and long robe fluttered as he muttered to himself in a low voice. Now was the second day of his punishment, so he couldn't personally go to the 100 Beast Valley. Therefore, he asked Wu Chang to do it. He wanted Chu Mu dead, and he couldn't wait for even a second. A woo! Low and angry howls continuously sounded. The wind whistled as 3 gray figures attacked from different directions like lightning. They pounced over, their sharp claws flashing with a cold luster, tearing everything apart. A figure with messy footsteps, his body seemed to have turned into a willow branch. A gust of wind blew, and his body swayed along with the wind, almost brushing past the cold claws. Chu Mu's expression was relaxed and carefree. It was as if he wasn't surrounded by 3 ferocious fanged wolves, but was instead enjoying the scenery. The combination of chaotic steps and swaying willow in the wind was almost perfect. Within a small area, he dodged the sharp claws of the 3 fierce fanged wolves, creating countless afterimages, causing the attacks of the fierce fanged wolves to all miss. Suddenly, a hint of sharpness flashed through his eyes. With a clanging sound, the snow-white sword light flashed. It was as if a gust of wind was blowing, condensing into a faint green light. Thrusting, chopping, cutting, one sword split into 3, leaving behind 3 sword shadows. 3 blood-curdling screams were heard, and 3 streaks of blood blossomed. The 3 vicious fanged wolves' left eyes were tightly shut, and a wisp of scarlet blood flowed out. Even though one of the fierce fanged wolf's eyes was damaged, its ferocious nature was stimulated, and it became even more violent. One of the fierce fanged wolves charged from the front. Its head protruded and its mouth opened, revealing its frightening sharp teeth. It was like a sword piercing towards Chu Mu, wanting to tear him apart. One of the fierce fanged wolves charged from behind, waving its sharp claws. The afterimages of the claws crisscrossed, grabbing towards Chu Mu's legs, wanting to tear Chu Mu's legs apart. One of the fierce fanged wolves suddenly jumped up high, and from top to bottom, it opened its front claws, wanting to tear Chu Mu into pieces from top to bottom. The 3 fierce fanged wolves, at this moment, actually showed an extremely skilled cooperation, surrounding Chu Mu from top to bottom. Their speed was extremely fast, unbelievably fast. If it were any swordsman at the 6th level of the Sword Chi realm, he would definitely die. At the moment of danger, Chu Mu's expression was calm. His body moved, swaying violently like a willow branch being blown by a strong wind. In an instant, 3 figures appeared, as if they were split from his body. 3 heads and 6 arms, each of the 3 figures attacked with a sword. It was as if 3 gusts of wind blew over. These 3 sword attacks did not use the breeze brushing faces, but were just basic sword techniques that incorporated some understanding of the wind. The 3 sword attacks once again pierced the eyes of the fierce fanged wolves in their right eyes. The sword light condensed, and the power penetrated the tip of the sword. A tyrannical force pressed against the tip of the sword, breaking into the right eyes of the fierce fanged wolves. The sword light twisted, and the right eyes of the fierce fanged wolves were crushed. Blood splattered, and they screamed in pain, flying backwards. This time, he did not hold back at all. After the 3 fierce fanged wolves fell to the ground, they kept crying out, struggling, twitching, and whimpering. However, one of their eyes was tightly shut, and the other was a terrifying bloody hole with blood gushing out. The terrifying power penetrated their brains through their right eyes and destroyed them. 10 days. Every day I will fight with the fierce beast. Chu Mu glanced at the 3 struggling fierce fanged wolves and said to himself, "Swordsmanship is indeed the art of killing." In these 10 days, although I did not practice swordsmanship as usual, my attainment in swordsmanship has improved in a straight line. In just 10 days, my progress in swordsmanship has surpassed that of a year of hard practice. After the baptism of blood, I feel that whether I attack or withdraw the sword, there is a sense of returning to the original. My basic swordsmanship has reached a bottleneck. If I break through again, I will reach the level of a swordsmanship grandmaster. As he spoke, his heart beat faster, and his tone was somewhat excited. A swordsmanship grandmaster can have sword chi. What is the difference between this sword chi and the sword chi of a swordsman? After a long while, Chu Mu calmed down. He knew that although his basic swordsmanship had reached a bottleneck, he also knew that once he broke through, he would definitely become a swordsmanship grandmaster. However, many swordsmanship grandmasters were stuck at this bottleneck for their entire lives, unable to break through even when they died. However, once they broke through, they would be able to use the sword chi to nourish their bodies, rejuvenate their bodies, and extend their lifespan by 30 to 40 years. At this time, the 3 fierce-fanged wolves stopped struggling and died completely. Chumu once again removed the fangs of the fierce-fanged wolves. In 10 days, he had eaten all the dry rations he had brought. He had also refilled his water bottle several times. His steel sword had been damaged and thrown away. Now there were many small cracks on his current sword. After all, the steel sword was only used by outer disciples to practice swordsmanship. Its quality was average, and the fierce beast's fur was very tough. After being cut many times, it was quickly damaged. Fortunately, his swordsmanship was superb, and he always killed the fierce beasts with the smallest price. If it were other swordsmen, the steel sword would be completely damaged within 2 days. This sword probably won't be able to last for many days. My basic swordsmanship has reached a bottleneck. Although the increase in power is not as great as the breeze sword art, it still allows me to attack faster and more nimbly. Chumu muttered to himself, the only pity is that my sword chi cultivation is still at the early 5th stage of the sword chi realm. I haven't found any spiritual herbs that can increase my cultivation. Walking to the side of a stream, he took down his water bottle and refilled it. At this time, 4 people in their 20s and 30s walked over. They were dressed in tight clothes and had swords on their back. Their steps were steady, and it seemed that they had a solid foundation. When they saw Chumu, they had different expressions. Are you an outer disciple of the Azure Edge Sword sect? The leader of the 4 swordsmen was around 30 years old. He had a square face, and his eyes flickered. He swept his eyes over Chumu's body and glanced at Chumu's steel sword. He squeezed out a smile and cupped his hands towards Chumu as he spoke politely. What's the matter? Chumu hung up his water bottle and replied indifferently. He was secretly impressed by this guy's observation skills. He was able to recognize his identity from the symbol on his gray robe and steel sword. Sir, let's talk in private. The leader's eyes flashed with a mysterious light. He approached Chumu and said in a low voice, we found a stalk of 3 sungrass that is about to mature. However, there is a black-back bear guarding it. The black-back bear is a mid-level fierce beast with the strength of a 7th stage sword chi realm warrior. The 4 of us might not be able to do anything to it. And sir, you are a disciple of the Azure Edge Sword sect. Your strength is not something that loose swordsmen like us can compare to. I believe that with your help, we will definitely be able to kill that black-back bear and get the 3 sun fruit. Is that so? After we get the 3 sun fruit, how will we split it? Chumu's eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness as he asked. We have admired the Azure Edge Sword sect for a long time. Unfortunately, our talents are not good enough. We are not fated to be with your sect. The leader of the loose swordsman sighed and then changed the topic. We are not greedy. As long as we have the corpse of the black-back bear and the 3 sungrass, it will be enough. As for the 3 sun fruit, it will belong to you. How about it? Sir, I believe that with the 3 sun fruit, your sword chi cultivation will improve significantly. At that time, please don't forget about us. No problem. Chumu purposely showed a smug expression and smiled. Chapter 17. 5 figures quickly ran through the forest. As their footsteps landed, they stepped on the dead branches and leaves, making a slight cracking sound. When the wind blew, it dissipated into nothingness. The black-backed bear is a mid-level ferocious beast. Its strength is equivalent to a swordsman at the 7th level of the sword chi realm. With the strength of the 5 of us, it will be difficult to take it down. Chumu pretended to be curious as he ran. His eyesight was extraordinary. He could see that the cultivation of these 4 loose swordsmen were all below the 7th level of the sword chi realm. The leader was probably at the 6th level of the sword chi realm. As for the other 3, they were at the 5th level of the sword chi realm. With such a combination of strength, it would be suicide to fight against a swordsman at the 7th level of the sword chi realm. However, if they fought against a ferocious beast at the 7th level of the sword chi realm, there was still some possibility. After all, ferocious beasts had very low intelligence. Sir, don't worry. We have long been prepared. We were just worried that something might happen, so we planned to find one more person. We didn't expect to meet you. The disciple of the Azure Edge Sword sect made us very confident. The leader of the loose swordsmen gave a simple explanation while flattering Chu Mu. If it were other disciples, they would probably feel as if they were floating. It's good that you are prepared. Chu Mu didn't ask much about the preparation. His expression was a little profound. He knew that there was no such good thing in the world as giving him a 3-sun fruit. In the illustrated book of 100 Herbs, the 3-sun fruit was one of the spiritual herbs used to refine the chi-breaking pill. Taking it alone was several times more effective than the chi-gathering pill. Its value was extraordinary. This was also the reason why Chu Mu agreed. Moreover, the cultivation of these guys was not in his eyes at all. Sir, we don't know anything about you. Shouldn't you tell us what swordsmanship you are practicing? Suddenly, a short young loose swordsman interrupted. I am practicing 2 swordsmanship. One is the entry-level swordsmanship, and the other is the mid-level swordsmanship. Chu Mu said with an appropriate look of complacency and pride on his face. Mid-level swordsmanship. The 4 swordsmen exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, they secretly looked at each other and saw a trace of excitement in each other's eyes. Sir, you are indeed worthy of being a disciple of the Azure Edge Sword sect. You must be greatly valued by the sect. Otherwise, how could you have a middle-tier sword technique to train in? The leader of the scattered swordsmen, Lu Tao, said with a smile, trying to fish for information from Chu Mu. It's nothing. It's just that my talent in swordsmanship is outstanding, so an elder appreciates me. Chu Mu waved his hand and said. He wanted to keep a low profile but couldn't help feeling proud. I wonder to what extent have you cultivated your middle-level sword skills? Lu Tao asked in a tone that contained a hint of amazement. I've basically mastered it. I can use the killing move, but I need a few breaths of time to prepare. Chu Mu looked as if he couldn't wait to tell all his secrets and show off in front of these swordsmen. He even pretended to sigh regretfully and said, It's a pity that my sword chi cultivation is too low. I can only use 1 killing move. After using it, there won't be much sword chi left. So, once I use the killing move to attack the blackback bear, I won't have much fighting strength left. Don't worry, sir. The killing move of a mid-level sword skill is extremely powerful. Once it hits the blackback bear, even if it doesn't die immediately, it will definitely be seriously injured and lose the ability to fight. Lu Tao's eyes flashed with a touch of ecstasy, but he quickly suppressed it. However, his voice was still a little trembling because of excitement. We will also protect you and let you recover your sword chi cultivation. As he spoke, Lu Tao suddenly stretched out his hand to stop the crowd and glanced at the short young man. The short young man walked forward with his back bent and took out something from the cloth bag at his waist. It was a black ball that emitted a sweet fragrance. Chu Mu looked pensive. Immediately, the short young man hid behind a big rock and threw out the black ball the size of a fist. Not far behind the big rock, there seemed to be some movement. There was a low muffled roar, but Chu Mu and the others couldn't see it because of the big rock. That's the killer bee's honey. It's the blackback bear's favorite food. When the blackback bear sees the killer bee's honey, it won't think much and will eat it directly. The leader of the loose swordsmen explained in a low voice, and we put a lot of anesthetic in that ball of honey. After eating it, within half an hour, the medicinal effect will be released. At that time, the blackback bear will be affected. Its movements will be slow and its reaction will be slow. Its strength will be reduced by at least 30%. At that time, we will create an opportunity for you. Your mid-level killing move can definitely hit the blackback bear. When Chu Mu heard this, he immediately understood. Under the effect of the anesthetic, the blackback bear's strength would be reduced by 30%. They would be more confident in killing the blackback bear. As for why they didn't use poison, it was very simple. Once poison was used, the medicinal effect would remain in the blackback bear's body, causing it to lose its original value. It should be known that the blackback bear was a mid-level fierce beast. The bear skin, bear paws, bear meat, bear bones, bear blood and so on could all be sold for a good price. Soon, half an incense stick's time had passed. "Let's do it. Your Excellency, please do your best," Lu Tao said. Soon after, a few people pulled out their swords and quickly rushed forward. Chu Mu also rushed forward. Jumping over a large rock, he saw an enormous gray bear lying on the ground. The fur on its back was black, covering its entire body from head to tail. Chu Mu also saw that a few meters behind the blackback bear, there was a light red grass. Among the 3 leaves, there was a red fruit the size of a longan. It was very tempting. That was the 3 suns' fruit. The appearance of Lu Tao and the others, with their murderous aura, immediately startled the blackback bear. Roar! The blackback bear awoke and abruptly stood up. Its thick bare paws slapped the ground, causing it to vibrate like a drum. It was like a small hill, and its dark eyes let out an extremely savage and bloodthirsty glint. Its protruding mouth abruptly opened, and at Chu Mu and the others, it let out a thunderous roar. In an instant it was as if the earth was shaking. Such power made people's expression change. "Kill!" Lu Tao shouted, holding his sword high with both hands, leaping up, a sword, as if splitting a mountain and splitting a stone. The momentum was overwhelming. The sword used by Lu Tao was different from the ordinary sword. It was longer, palm-wide and looked heavier. Under the slash, the power was stronger. The other 3 also rushed forward and attacked the blackback bear from the side. Chu Mu did not directly attack, but stared at the blackback bear, observing its every reaction. Roar! Seeing these little things, even daring to attack itself, the blackback bear was even angrier. Its small eyes were covered with a layer of bloody light. Like a human, it stood up, raised its thick bare paw, and slapped it hard. Like swatting a fly, it swatted at Lu Tao. This palm was too strong. If it hit the head, it would explode directly. The wind whistled, and the huge wave came like a wave. Lu Tao's face changed greatly, and he twisted his wrist abruptly, and the big sword slashed at the blackback bear's huge paw. With a bang, the sharpness of the big sword only left a faint white mark on the bear's paw, but Lu Tao was slapped to one side by the blackback bear's huge paw force. The other 3 loose swordsmen rushed to the blackback bear's sides and performed swordsmanship from the sides and abdomen. 3 swords, 3 low-level swordsmanship killing moves, hit the blackback bear's body at the same time. Sword chi crisscrossed, leaving wounds on the blackback bear's body, dripping with blood. Roar! The blackback bear was furious. It raised the other bear paw. On the bear paw, there was a faint yellow luster. The paw slammed down as if it was swatting a bug. Retreat, its bear fury. Lu Tao quickly rolled 2 laps and got up. When he saw it, his face changed greatly and he roared. Bear fury, the blackback bear's beast skill, low level. Its power was equivalent to a low-level swordsmanship killing move, but when it was used by a stage 7 sword chi realm blackback bear, its power was extraordinary. With a bang, the earth shook and the ground shattered. A crater was directly blasted open. Sand and stones shot out like hidden weapons. The powerful impact caused the 3 loose swordsmen to fly back. One of them was unlucky enough to dodge a step too late and was swept by the attack. Half of his body was in intense pain, and blood wildly spurted out. Kill! Lu Tao's face was filled with grief and indignation. He roared and slashed out with his sword. Under the big sword, a clear, fierce tiger appeared. It was Tiger Roar Frenzy, and its power was even stronger than when WNG Lei used it. The blackback bear, which had taken anesthetic, was much slower to react. It was immediately hit by the fierce tiger. With a bang, a wound appeared on its abdomen, and blood spurted out. The huge force caused the blackback bear to retreat 2 steps. "Sir, Why haven't you made your move yet? Lu Tao's sword succeeded, but he quickly retreated. At the same time, he roared at Chu Mu. Chapter 18. When the breeze blows, do you hear its ultimate sound? Final blow of the breeze. Chu Mu's steel sword slashed through the air. The green light on the sword flew out and compressed into a wind blade more than half a meter long. It seemed to cut the sky in half as it flew out. This sword was too fast, too fierce. Lu Tao and the other independent swordsmen saw this scene, and their eyes suddenly widened. It was the killing move of an intermediate swordsmanship. That was the advanced swordsmanship that independent swordsmen like them coveted but couldn't get. The black-back bear instinctively felt the extreme danger approaching and wanted to dodge. However, it was slowed down by the anesthetic. Chu Mu, on the other hand, seized this instant of opportunity, which happened to be the moment the black-back bear was knocked back by Lu Tao's tiger roar wild kill. There was no wind. All the wind seemed to be compressed and condensed into a wind blade. However, Lu Tao and the others heard the roar of the wind in their ears. It was as if there was a strong gust of wind blowing in their faces, messing them up. With a swoosh, the wind blade of the final blow of the breeze, with an irresistible and unparalleled sharpness, slashed at the black-back bear's abdomen. In the blink of an eye, the black-back bear's abdomen was cut open with a terrible wound. Blood gushed out like it didn't cost money. The black-back bear let out a painful roar and retreated again and again. Its whole body was like a thick tree falling backward. With a loud bang, the ground shook and dust flew. The huge wound on the black-back bear's abdomen was still gushing out blood and sprinkling on its body. The gray fur was soaked and stuck to the skin. Vaguely, it seemed that the internal organs and intestines were about to ooze out of the huge and terrible wound. That wound was like an open monster's mouth. Roar! Roar! The black-back bear's whole body twitched and rolled. Its thick bare paws crazily slapped the ground as if this could reduce its pain. Blood kept flowing out and the surrounding ground was scarlet. The black-back bear's struggle was getting weaker and weaker. What a strong intermediate swordsmanship! Lu Tao stood up, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and said with difficulty. Immediately, his heart was incomparably excited. It was as if he was about to learn this intermediate swordsmanship. The other independent swordsmen were also stunned. They stared at the huge wound on the black-back bear's abdomen for a long time without saying a word. They were all stunned by Chu Mu's sword. Huff! Huff! Chu Mu breathed heavily. His face was a little pale. He leaned back against the big rock and took a few deep breaths and showed a proud smile. How is it? My swordsmanship is very powerful. Powerful, indeed extremely powerful. Lu Tao glanced at the other two uninjured loose swordsmen and faintly nodded his head in acknowledgement. The three people, from three different directions, slowly walked towards Chu Mu. Their expressions were a bit strange, as if they were smiling yet not smiling. Sir, what's the name of your intermediate sword skill? Lu Tao asked again. Breeze swordsmanship, do you want to learn it? Chu Mu suddenly asked, making Lu Tao and the others stop in their tracks. They were a little unprepared. Immediately they said with a fake smile, Such a powerful swordsmanship, of course we want to learn it. Since you are willing to teach it to us, it couldn't be better. However, in order to avoid trouble, you should give us the swordsmanship book. Book? I didn't bring it, but if you have paper and pen, I can draw it again, just like a book. Chu Mu laughed. This made Lu Tao and the others even more confused. Their current attitude had become obvious. At first glance, it was obvious that they were up to no good. But this guy, he didn't seem to know at all, and he even took the initiative to mention it. Was he a fool? Very well, since you are so cooperative, then I will let you go. Lu Tao laughed strangely. What do you mean by this? Chu Mu seemed to have understood. His face became even paler. He wanted to retreat but was blocked by big rock. He immediately raised his sword in front of him with a vigilant look. It seems that you are not only slow, but also a little stupid. Lu Tao laughed strangely. The other two scattered swordsmen also laughed strangely. As for the injured one, he had already taken out some healing medicine and applied it on himself. He leaned to the side and looked at Chu Mu as if he was looking at an idiot. Do you really think that we will give you the 3 suns fruit for free? You are too naive. Are all the disciples of the sword faction as stupid as you? Lu Tao continued to ridicule. He had already formed a triangle with the other 2 swordsmen. They were 2 meters away from Chu Mu to prevent him from escaping, even though Chu Mu looked a little weak at the moment. I hate disciples of the sword faction like you the most. You are all stupid and think that you are very powerful. Isn't it because you have the sword faction as your backing? Isn't it because you can learn more swordsmanship? In the end, you are just a bunch of fools who only know how to practice swordsmanship. The short youth seemed to have a particular opinion of the sword faction disciples. His tone and expression were filled with resentment. Don't talk nonsense with him. First, tie this fool up and force him to write the clear wind sword technique. At that time, we can practice the clear wind sword technique. Another loose swordsman smiled evilly and said, Intermediate swordsmanship, I dream of getting it. After we all learn it, we can take this swordsmanship to auction. At that time, we can sell it for a lot of gold and buy medicinal pills to help with our cultivation. As he spoke, he seemed to be imagining a beautiful future. He almost laughed foolishly. Brat, are you going to cooperate or do you want us to do it? Although we don't have intermediate sword techniques, our methods of dealing with people are very outstanding. Lu Tao laughed sinisterly. It seemed that this was not the first time he had done this. Originally, if you guys cooperate with me obediently after killing the blackback bear, I will get the 3 suns fruit. You guys can also get the 3 suns grass and the blackback bear. Chu Mu had been listening to their words. His expression did not change. At this time, he suddenly revealed a faint smile. It was a faint smile that was filled with confidence, as if he was in control of the situation. This kind of smile made Lu Tao instinctively feel that something was wrong. But unfortunately, from the beginning, you guys didn't have good intentions. You wanted to use me. After using me, you still wanted to gain benefits from me before killing me. It seems that you are not stupid. Lu Tao's expression became very ugly. He growled, but so what? The killing move you used just now was extremely powerful. Even among the intermediate sword techniques, it is also extraordinary. Do you think you can use such a killing move a second time? I'm afraid that you don't have much sword chi left now. Do you think that with your current strength and those few words, we will let you go? Let me tell you, dream on. You're right. Executing such a powerful killing move is indeed enough to completely exhaust the sword chi of a 5th-level sword chi realm swordsman. However, all of you will never know the profoundness behind it. Tang Fan's lips curled into a strange smile. He had used the comprehension of wind to increase the power of the sword move just now. It was only because of this that he was able to kill the blackback bear. Do you know why I am telling you all this? Without waiting for Lu Tao and the others to speak, Chu Mu suddenly spoke again. The strange smile on his lips became even more obvious. Now you guys are even more curious and can't wait to know more. Unfortunately, I will only tell you this much. My purpose is to let you die without knowing why. That's right, I did it on purpose. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Mu's aura changed. A sharp light shot up into the sky, causing Lu Tao and the others' expressions to change drastically. However, before they could react, Chu Mu's footsteps staggered. His body swayed like a willow branch and instantly split into 3. 3 heads and 6 arms, each with 3 heads and 6 arms, attacked with his sword. 3 snow-white sword light with a faint green color swept across the necks of Lu Tao and the others like a gentle breeze. With a poochie sound, blood spurted out. What a fast sword! This was the last thought of Lu Tao and the others. Their eyes were wide open, filled with disbelief and a trace of fear that had just appeared. "No! Don't kill me! Don't kill me!" The injured, scattered swordsman's eyes were wide open, filled with fear. His whole body was trembling like a sieve. Everything was arranged by Lu Tao. "It has nothing to do with me. Don't worry, my sword is very fast. You won't feel any pain." Chu Mu smiled slightly. The injured, scattered swordsman was even more frightened. Indeed, Chu Mu's sword was very fast, very fast. It was so fast that in an instant it was as if there were 3 people stabbing out with 3 swords at the same time. On Earth, his master had given Chu Mu an evaluation. He was a very excellent swordsman. He was extremely talented and was almost born for the sword. His character was like a sword with a sharp edge, like water with a calm temperament, like wind with a graceful temperament, but occasionally there would be some mischief. For example, just now. Chapter 19. For the first time, Chu Mu's sword was stained with human blood. Shaking off the blood on the tip of the sword, his expression was calm as he swept his gaze over the bodies of the 4 scattered swordsmen. His eyes were like the water in an ancient well, without any ripples. He did not feel uncomfortable because it was his first time killing someone. Swordsmanship is the art of killing. I am indeed a person born for the sword. Muttering to himself, he closed his eyes and stood quietly, letting the breeze blow past. His hair and clothes fluttered as if riding the wind. The feeling of killing ferocious beasts and killing people is completely different. It seems that the bottleneck of my swordsmanship has loosened. He remembered that on Earth, his master once told him that there was a swordsmanship grandmaster in the early years. His breakthrough was completed on the battlefield. Killing people, from a swordsmanship grandmaster to a swordsmanship grandmaster, and passed down a sentence. Swordsmanship is the art of killing. Immediately, he opened his eyes and walked towards Lu Tao's body. He searched his body and took out some things from his chest. More than 100 taels of silver, 3 qi nourishing pills, 4 qi recovering pills, and some other things. Qi recovering pills, as the name suggests, were pills used to recover sword energy. Its value was a little higher than qi nourishing pills. After putting all these things into the bag, Chu Mu looked at the swords of the 4 scattered swordsmen. There was a big sword, a short sword, and 2 black iron swords. Chu Mu did not like the big sword and short sword, but the 2 black iron swords were similar to the fine steel sword, but the degree of damage was more serious than the fine steel sword, so he could only throw them away. At this time, his nose smelled a fragrance that seemed to have a trace of warmth. The 3 suns' fruit is ripe. Chu Mu immediately showed a touch of joy and strode towards the 3 suns' grass. The red fruit in the middle of the 3 leaves of the 3 suns' grass emitted a burst of warm fragrance. It was bright red, as if it was about to burn. He immediately took out the 100 Herb Illustrated Handbook, flipped to the page of the 3 suns' grass, and carefully looked at it. Although he had looked at it before and memorized it, he only looked at it in general and had a general understanding. He did not go deeper. This is a bit troublesome. Closing the 100 sketches, he frowned slightly. Once the 3 suns' fruit ripens, it must be sealed and preserved in a high-quality jade box. Only then can it retain its temperature, which is also its medicinal properties. Otherwise, it will lose its temperature. Once the temperature was lost, the medicinal properties would be lost. However, I don't have a high-quality jade box. These 4 loose swordsmen's jade boxes are only incense wood boxes. They can only store ordinary spiritual medicines. Although I can exchange the 3 suns' fruit for 100 contribution points and 5 qi gathering pills if I bring it back to the sword sect, the conditions don't allow it, so I can only consume it now. The sword light flashed, just in time to flick the 3 suns' fruit that had fallen off naturally into the air. It drew an arc in the air, rolled, and fell into his mouth. Immediately, he sat down cross-legged and placed the fine steel sword on his legs. His thumbs and index fingers were interlocked and placed on his knees. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, eliminating all distracting thoughts. He circulated the sword chi according to the chi cultivation sword chi manual. After ripening, the 3 sun fruit would naturally fall off. At this time, its temperature would start to drop bit by bit. The 3 sun fruits' medicinal properties were in the temperature, and a drop in temperature meant that the medicinal properties were lost. Therefore, Chu Mu could not wait to eat the 3 suns fruit, so as to avoid losing too much of its medicinal properties. After the 3 suns fruit fell into his mouth, he sat down cross-legged and started to circulate the sword chi. At the same time, he lightly bit into it. He felt a warm current flowing out, filling his mouth with a rich fragrance. It was as if he had suddenly drunk a mouthful of scalding hot and rich flower tea. With a gulp, his Adam's apple moved, and he swallowed the 3 suns fruit juice, which flowed rapidly through his throat into his body. Hot, very hot. His skin instantly turned red, and a trace of steam rose from his body like smoke. The 3 suns fruit juice flowed through his throat into his body, turning into a torrent of energy. It was scorching hot, as if magma was surging fiercely, rushing into his body and wreaking havoc. Chu Mu's willpower was definitely superhuman. He felt as if there was a fire burning in his body, growing stronger and stronger, as if it wanted to burn him to ashes from the inside out. Under such circumstances, an ordinary person would have already lost their mind, and would not be able to circulate the sword chi properly. However, he endured the high temperature and maintained a clear mind, wholeheartedly moving the sword chi. It was as if the torrent of heat in his body that was about to burn his internal organs and bones into ashes did not affect him at all. On the 100 Herb Illustrated Handbook, there was a note in red that the 3 suns fruit juice had an extremely high temperature. To consume it, it had to be combined with some other medicine that lowered the temperature. Otherwise, it could burn the internal organs, meridians, and so on. It could even burn the brain, turning the person into an idiot. However, Chu Mu did not care. This was because on Earth, in order to practice his swordsmanship, he had gone through many trials and tribulations. This kind of high temperature was nothing to him. Even though he had changed his body, his soul was still his. Furthermore, because of the fusion, he had become even stronger. Therefore, his willpower, his mind, and his soul could completely withstand the burning of this high temperature. He could even ignore it. He wholeheartedly controlled the sword chi, circulating it one small cycle after another. Compared to the torrent of heat from the 3 suns fruit, Chu Mu's sword chi appeared very weak. It was like comparing a stream to a river. However, Chu Mu's sword chi was incomparably condensed and pure. When it collided with the torrent of heat, not only was it not defeated, it even cut open the torrent of heat. Furthermore, as it was transported, it absorbed and condensed traces of the torrent of heat and transformed them into sword chi. This caused the sword chi to rapidly grow at a speed that could be felt. As for his meridians, they also suffered slight damage from the torrent of heat from the 3 suns fruit. However, as the sword chi passed by, the scorching energy merged into his meridians. Not only did it heal the damage to his meridians, it also became even tougher. Not long after, it had already circulated 13 small cycles. The limit of the 4th stage of the sword chi realm was 10 small cycles. When he broke through to the 5th stage of the sword chi realm, the limit increased to 13 small cycles. However, the torrent of heat from the 3 suns fruit had not been completely absorbed yet. He felt that he could continue to carry it. The 14th small cycle, the sword chi increased slightly. The 15th small cycle, the sword chi increased slightly. The 16th small cycle, the meridians began to emit a tearing pain. Chu Mu knew that the limit was 15 small cycles. This was his current limit. If he continued to forcefully carry it, it would only cause irreparable damage to his meridians. It seems that I can only stop here. The remaining medicinal effects can only be dispersed. When he opened his eyes, they were as clear as a mountain stream. There was also a trace of sharpness in them. He opened his mouth and slowly exhaled. This breath was white and carried a scorching heat. It shot out like a sword. As this breath shot out, the medicinal effects of the 3 suns fruit in his body quickly dissipated. At the late stage of the 5th stage of the sword chi realm, the strength of my meridians has increased. I can now carry 2 more small cycles. The effects of 1 3 suns fruit are actually so strong. Chu Mu was inwardly speechless. 5 chi gathering pills would definitely not be able to raise his cultivation to the late stage of the 5th stage of the sword chi realm, nor would it be able to strengthen his meridians. To Chu Mu, there was still a difference between 13 small cycles and 15 small cycles. 15 small cycles meant that his sword chi cultivation efficiency was 3 times that of someone of the same stage. Where did that bastard Chu Mu go? Wu Chang said with a murderous aura as he killed a low-level ferocious beast with his sword. Blood splattered everywhere and dripped onto the corner of his mouth. He liked Wang Feng. Yes, ever since Wang Feng saved his life, he had liked Wang Feng. Thus, when he saw how much Wang Feng hated Chu Mu, he also hated Chu Mu. It had already been 10 days since Wang Feng asked him to enter the 100-Beast Valley. He had killed many ferocious beasts, but he still had not found Chu Mu. This made him somewhat anxious and impatient. Damn bastard. If I find you, you're dead. There was darkness in Wu Chang's eyes, and there was a kind of perverted pleasure in his tone. I will break the tendons in your arms and legs, and then leave 32 wounds on your body, making you howl in despair. Finally, I will kill you, cut off your head, and bring it back to Senior Brother Wang. Senior Brother Wang will be very happy.